So the Steadfast Steward update is finally out. If you have not, if you did not hear, basically a couple months ago they said they wanted to go through the game and rework some of the game, kind of like from foundation up a little bit. Um, and most importantly, they wanted to finish all of the rest of the hero rework. So heading into this, we had Plague Doctor, Occultist, Runaway, Hellion, Leper that all had to get reworked. Plague Doctor, Occultist, and Runaway did get reworked in quite a big way in some situations. Hellion and Leper did not, basically because they're coming out with weekly kind of experimental updates for this, and they ended up in some situations, like Physician, for example, they reworked it and then they ended up reworking it essentially kind of again. So the edits that they kind of did to make these into final drafts, these paths into final drafts, took quite a bit of time, and basically they've said that Hellion and Leper reworks are going to be after the end of August. The news, in case you hadn't heard, is they announced a rough release date for the third campaign of Kingdoms, the Crimson Courtiers. So that'll be late August, and then they said after that they'll go into Hellion and Leper rework. As far as I'm concerned, they put a lot of work, took a lot of feedback, made a lot of adjustments with these paths, with Plague Doctor, Occultist, Runaway. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, what's the quote? A rushed game will always suck, but a delayed game will eventually be good. That's the way that I tend to look at it. If they want Hellion and Leper to cook a little more as they kind of figure them out, as long as they're fun in the end, really, that's kind of all that matters. So the purpose of this video basically is I'm going to be breaking down the path reworks specifically. So Runaway, Plague Doctor, Occultist, I'm going to be going through each one of them individually and kind of talking about the big changes and how their playstyle changes, if it has changed at all. Keep in mind the patch notes. So these are in the description if you would like. The patch notes are very long. It's like 12 seconds of legitimate scrolling. This is mostly hero reworks, but it's not completely. There are some things at the end as far as like the dam, items changes, trinket changes, etc. So I would say definitely look over this. There's also weak tokens, memories, battle modifiers, ordainment. The reason I'm not going over this in this video is just based on the fact that you can. These are easier to kind of read and understand as opposed to the hero reworks. Are a whole bunch of this, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you got to see them, see the changes, and really kind of compare everything to really see the difference. So definitely look at these patch notes yourself, skim them. But you can use this video for me to talk about basically all the path changes and everything. If you don't know who I am, stream every day, twitch.tv/MarinerHawk. I have like 3,500 hours in this game, give or take. At this point, I've been testing these reworks as they first came out, and then I've been testing them now that they're final. So I have a lot of experience with these. Alongside this, I made this guide right here. So it's in the description also, tinyurl.com/steadfastdd2. I made this guide myself, basically, to go through every path. So if you want to use this instead of this video, or alongside this video, or just use this video, basically the purpose of this is I talk about the changes, and then I show off the old skills versus the new skills. Obviously in game you can use it compared to Wanderer, to the new skill or whatever, but this I specifically wanted, if anybody had played old Surgeon, okay, what is old now that new Surgeon is out, how do you compare the two? So I did that with every path, as I talked about this. At the bottom I talk about how the path works differently, who it works with, some of my thoughts about it, and then basically a play style that I believe to be the most efficient, but obviously there's different ways to go about it. So please use this. I put a lot of time into it. tinyurl.com/steadfastdd2. I'll be kind of referencing this too as I talk about paths. But yeah, these paths in general, there's not really any paths that I personally am unhappy with. I think they're all pretty good. There's a couple changes maybe I'm not obviously a huge fan of, but for the most part, these are not just like simple. And the Wanderers are usually kind of some simple small changes. But overall, like the other paths, in some situations, they're complete like overhauls. So really fun update. It's a lot of fun to get into. I hope that I can help you learn these paths well. Obviously, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to come to my stream, or you can post in the comments and I'll help you out. A little bit of advice as far as how I'm going about this video. There are chapters in the video, so if you want to jump to any particular hero, you are more than welcome to. I would at least, if you're interested in playing a hero, I would at least look at the small section where I talk about Wanderer, because Wanderer, the Wanderer is the base version for the rest of these paths, so there are more changes to paths because the Wanderer changes also, like Blinding Gas, for example. Alchemist, Physician, Surgeon, they might use Wanderer, Blinding Gas, and there's a slight difference, blah, blah, blah. And also, I'm going to talk about kind of fundamentally how philosophically, I guess they kind of changed some of these wanderers. So at least you can jump around the paths as much as you would like. At least probably listen to me talk about the wanderer, because it'll make more sense to understand kind of the changes with the other paths. So as you can see, there's a lot of small changes. The asterisks here are just really small changes to Plague Doctor Wanderer. We start with Plague Doctor Wanderer. I'll go through all her paths also. The minor ability changes that they went to is they made it so if Binding Gas crits, whether it be through a natural crit or a crit token, it is guaranteed to combo. So that's a nice little bonus, especially with Blinding Gas having, what is it? Is it 10%? I forget off the top of my head. 5%, and then it's 15% mastered. So considering it hits two abilities, or it hits two enemies, sorry, pretty good crit chance, honestly. So you can apply some combo to the back line, set that up for Highwayman to stun, or Deadeye to do some combo or whatever. Pretty nice little buff. And that's really, with all of the Wanderers, that's really kind of all these. Just small little changes that are nice little touch-ups. Just because, you know, they kind of haven't been touched in a while. One big thing that is with this update that should probably be mentioned is the fact that crits no longer increase dot duration. So you used to, 4 bleed over 3 turns. If you crit, it was 5. It was 4 bleed over 5 turns. So that no longer exists. There are still trinkets that do it, and there's still some abilities that do it. But just naturally on a crit, it works for both your side and the enemies. No longer add that extra duration. So they threw a lot of those into abilities or paths, basically to as like a bonus. So we'll talk about like Incision. Incision Mastered adds +1 duration on bleed when comboed. So little things like that. A big change. Basically, their idea is like, hey, we have other ideas for duration style different ways of adding duration. So they want to do it that instead of just naturally crit. So Noxious Blast Mastered does 5 blight instead of 6 blight, so a slight nerf, and then +1 duration on blight when combo. Ounce of Prevention, they let you use it in rank 2. I don't know why you're running Plague Doctor rank 2, but hey, technically, if you want to. Each dot res gets +5% more. Not too bad. And then the mastered version also grants +10% debuff resist. So a nice little boost if you're interested in using Ounce of Prevention. Disorienting Blast now removes guard. So that's kind of nice. And then the crit chance goes from 10 to 15%. Indiscriminate Science has a 2-turn cooldown. Before you start yelling, hear me out. It goes alongside this Magnesium Rain. So it gets an initial crit chance now that there's not a duration. And it clears the skill cooldowns if Mag Rain clears any corpses, which is basically anytime you're using it other than round 1. So even though Indiscriminate Science has that 2-turn cooldown now, you can still essentially, Indiscriminate Science, Mag Rain, Indiscriminate Science, and it's essentially the same as it was before. And also works with Ounce or anything along those lines. So a nice little change right there. Clearing the skill cooldowns if Mag Rain clears any corpses. And again, you're almost, unless you're applying it to set up for something else, almost always you're clearing corpses with it. Also, in case you didn't hear about the Plague Grenade nerf, Plague Grenade has a 1-turn cooldown now. So that was a change that was before actually the Steadfast Steward. So some changes, just easiest to show right here. So we talk about Cause of Death, small changes. Cause of Death, instead of being 75% to 100% damage, it's now 100 and then 125. So that's kind of nice. They gives it a execution when you master it. What ignores damage modifiers means is that any ability that ignores like strengths and crits, so because Cause of Death is variable, it just depends on the dot damage completely. There will be some abilities now that say they ignore damage modifiers. There are similar abilities that are dot bombs like that, but they do interact with like strength and crit tokens and just damage in general. So we'll get into that later. But basically, long story short, is the numbers are buffed, which also they did with Exanimate Sepsis and Scourge Sepsis. They buffed the numbers. It no longer combos, but it does have an execute. So just a small change of the ability, but a noticeable one. And then Old Emboldening Vapors. Emboldening Vapors got a slight buff, so it removes the daze now, and it removes daze and stun mastered. And then it gives 2 strength tokens and 2 strength tokens and a speed token mastered. But it has a cooldown now as opposed to upgraded. It used to not have a cooldown, and now it does. So small little changes alongside Plague Doctor. Basically, philosophically, kind of what did they want to do with the Plague Doctor? Is they wanted her to just have, and you'll see with the other paths, they wanted her to just have more interaction with dots. So kind of similar to like you know how Cause of Death can use with every dot, kind of similar to that, but you'll see some changes that kind of philosophically make sense as we get into the path reworks, kind of what all that means. Okay, so let's get into Surgeon. So Surgeon is a frontline path now, like a legitimate frontline path. So she can use Battlefield Medicine in the front ranks now, so that's pretty good. Like, she's kind of best in like the rank 1 or rank 2. She gets some tools to be tanky, so that's kind of nice. So you can sort of keep her alive. She definitely is a little bit of I don't want to say a liability, but if you are going to put her in the front ranks, which is good, it's a solid place to put her. You do got to keep an eye on her health a little bit, because she doesn't get the tools that obviously like a Man-at-Arms will get, or like, you know, Crusader, any of those typical kind of frontliners where they get a ton of blocks. She can get blocks, but it's not like a ton. She's not going to be a full tank up there, but she is going to be a front tank that can heal. And if you can basically keep an eye on her, it'll probably take you a little getting used to. You can keep an eye on her health, you can put her there. You can also put her in rank 3 if you would like, and kind of play similar to the old Surgeon. But it gives you an extra ability to play a healer slash kind of tank in rank 1 or 2. So I think it's really interesting path. So the path skills are Incision, Battlefield Medicine, Ounce of Prevention, Emboldening Vapors, Disorienting Blast, and Cause of Death. So I want to point out this gain on killing blow right here. So another thing is she doesn't get the old passive stats of extra melee damage and just like free health and free. She doesn't get a buffed Battlefield Medicine, at least not just based on the numbers. But she does get this gain on killing blow. So gain on killing blow, they made it so killing blow counts as corpses and it counts on dots. What that means is if you get a kill, let's say with Incision, you get a kill with Incision, then she gets 2 regen. If you hit him with Incision and the dot kills them, then you get the regen. Or you can kill a corpse in either way also, and you get the regen that. So killing blow does not necessarily mean just the straight damage. It can mean the dots also. So that could be nice. That's one of the tools that they gave her to kind of keep her alive. Incision is still her main damage. But it is not, you know, Surgeon was kind of a 2-button path before, where it was Incision and Battlefield Medicine, and that was pretty much it. Now it has the power spread a little bit, alongside giving her the new ranks. So it's a good path. I like Surgeon. I do like Surgeon. It again is still, Incision is still the main damage, or is the most effective damage, but it's not just like a 1-button path anymore. So let's get into changes. First, start off with Incision. Comparing it to Wander Hero, you'll see it has the same damage, so it doesn't have that big. You know, I think it was 5 to 11, was it before? I think it was 5 to 11 Mastered Incision. Now it's 4 to 7. Does not get the piercing off of combo, the bleed piercing, but what it does get is it gets +1 bleed dealt for the rest of the battle, and if it's mastered, then it gets +1 bleed and +1 burn for the rest of the battle. So even can be a nice little buff in like normal fights. But obviously, you talk like Kyurgen, Creature Den, obviously long boss fights, you can really stack the hell out of the much that you want to. So it's a fun little game. She does get, you know, 1 less bleed than Wanderer, but it's a nice little mini game to kind of be able to play and be able to do extra, like either extra mag rain burn or alongside incision bleed. It's still a potent ability. It doesn't have the 5 to 11 that it does before, but it's still a good ability. You know, they did have the 30% piercing a little bit into combo, and then they took it away. I'm not a huge fan of that change, just because Incision, again, is your main damage. She does have other damage abilities, but it is your main damage. So it was nice to kind of have that piercing. It's not the end of the world, though. Keep in mind, she doesn't get, she no longer gets minus piercing on Noxious Blast or Plague Grenade, so you can, if you decide to do that, you can play Surgeon like that. That's totally up to you. I like Incision a little more for the straight damage personally, but it's totally up to you. It depends on your team comp. So let's get into Battlefield Medicine. As you see, Battlefield Medicine can be used in 1, 2, 3 ranks instead of 3 and 4. So that's like the big change that kind of makes her a frontline viable. Unmastered, it is the same as a Wander Battlefield Medicine. The master version has changed because you see the master version here. She gets, or whoever the target getting healed is, gets healed more depending on the dots that they have. I just want to point out that's multiplicative, not additive. So it's not a plus 100% heal if they have all dots. That's multiplicative, so it's actually plus 6.25% more of a heal, depending on the dots that they have. So it ends up being, if they have all 3 dots, it ends up being a little under 50% heal. So still pretty good. The main change is that on Unmastered there, or on a Wanderer, sorry, on the right, you'll see there, is if she battlefield medicines somebody else, it gets rid of their dots and it gets rid of Plague Doctor's dots. So Surgeon doesn't have that. So it's something to keep an eye on if you're used to that. If you're really used to the clearing the dots essentially on her and somebody else, it no longer has that, but it does have the extra healing, which the extra healing can be nice. And is nice. There, there's obviously a lot of dots in this game, so it's a nice little change. But it is, if you are going to play her, definitely do keep in mind that she doesn't lose her own dots. So that's kind of an aspect, a more risky kind of aspect to her. So, to get into Ounce of Prevention, just different stats. Same ability, different stats. You can use it in 1, 2, 3 instead of 2, 3, 4. So she gives the team stun res and move res, and then if you master it, it is stun res, 30 stun move res, 10% debuff resist, plus 20% stress res. So just similar ability, just different stats. The main thing that kind of Surgeon gets is she gets a block token when she uses this ability, and you'll see it with a couple other abilities, but that is kind of your main way to keep her alive. So again, it's not a Man-at-Arms Crusader where they can spam blocks and be just a frontline tank, but she does get some tools, and it allows people who have played Surgeon a little bit more or understand the enemies a little bit more to, if you know that a big attack is coming, you can give her that block and it helps her a little bit. Keep in mind, again, if you are playing Surgeon in the like 1 or 2 rank, you will have to keep an eye on her in a way that you're probably not used to, because the old Surgeon having buffed health really helped, and she's somewhere, I wouldn't say she's squishy in the front as Surgeon, I wouldn't say she's tanky. She's somewhere in the middle. You kind of just have to play around it and sort of keep an eye on her. She's not glass cannon by any means, but you do have to sort of keep an eye on her. So you see Emboldening Vapors. Emboldening Vapors is another way that she can get a block. She can give a strength and a block token to a target, and then when you master it, she also gets it onto herself. You can target herself also. So meaning if you mastered it, you can give her 2 strength tokens, 2 block tokens. This could be a situation where even like Stone Mount really starts to get some value, where obviously Stone Mount is good in general, but the more blocks that you can give yourself at one time, the more value that it gets. So this will help keep her alive. Basically, between... I'll get into Disorienting Blast, I guess, before I say that. So Disorienting Blast now does damage and can be used in the front ranks. So it hits 1, 2, 3. So the same thing where it's a knockback of 1 with a daze, and then gives her a block token. And then when you master it, it does a little bit more damage and knockback 2. And then if Disorienting Blast crits, then it immobilizes them. So some situations that can be really good to kind of run through the fight a little bit, or play out the fight and lock a frontliner to the back. So what I was going to say is basically you will need to run, of these 3 abilities, Ounce of Prevention, Emboldening Vapors, and Disorienting Blast, that all give her blocks. I would recommend running 1, if not 2, depending on the team that you want to go about it, because she will need a block token on command in order to kind of keep her alive. So I think you should definitely run, again, 1, if not 2 of those, whichever one's your favorite. The ideal way would be like based on region. Like, if you're going into the Shroud or going into the Fetter, it's probably better to have Ounce of Prevention on, just so you don't get shuffled to hell and back. That'd be a good idea. And then, Emboldening Vapors if you want to be more aggressive, or Disorienting Blast if you're going to be going against targets that you want to daze, or like targets like the Cultist, where like if you can really push back the Evangelist, makes your life easier. The smartest idea would be to like switch them based on the region. That's not always practical. Either way, you're definitely going to want to run equipped. You're definitely going to want to equip one of them based on whichever one kind of like is your favorite. So the final change for Surgeon is Cause of Death. So you see Cause of Death, pretty simple. It doubles all bleed when it's unmastered, and it doubles all dots when mastered. So you can imagine there are some very good setups in this game to be able to do that, just to double dots, obviously, against bosses, or just in general. Keep in mind, if you do want to play rank 3 Surgeon, you lose Disorienting Blast and Cause of Death, so keep that in mind. It is still practical because you can run the other abilities that you would normally run, but keep in mind, you will be losing those 2 abilities. If that doesn't matter to you, that doesn't matter to you, but it's worth noting. So, Cause of Death also is a 1 use per combat. You gotta be smart about how you use it. You know, in most fights, it's just nice to get some value out of. It doesn't need to be the biggest. It's not like you need to stack 20 dots on them before you use it. Sometimes if you just, you know, if you're in a pillager fight or something and you happen to get 4 dot or whatever, just double it. Why not? Get out of the fight quicker. But a really interesting ability that I'm sure this is one of those abilities that's really going to feel strong the more that things get added to this game. You know, there's a lot of synergy. You talk about like double bleed dealt, the Leviathan trophy. There's a million ways that you can get value out of this. Exanimate Flagellant, get a lot of value out of that. Really simple, but interesting ability that you can really do some damage with. So if I was to, the way that I run, I would tell you the way that I run her. I like putting her like in rank 2. Keep in mind, rank 2 is the most often hit rank in the game, so that's a little scary, personally. But if you want to really lean into kind of what Surgeon does, I would say this, and then whichever of these 3 abilities that you want to use to get to your blocks. This is what I would say. Honestly, it's not super important what abilities you run. It's really just sort of how you play her. If you're not really running a dot team that you would get value out of Cause of Death, obviously you don't have to. That's a situation where you could run 2 of these block abilities. If you're running indiscriminate, or if you're running her in rank 1 and you don't get use out of indiscriminate science, that's another situation where you could run like 2 of these. If you want to run, you know, Incision and Noxious Blast, you can do that. You can decide kind of as you play it. Obviously, Magrain and getting the extra value out of Mastered Incision, Magrain. You can do that, but I would probably, if you're just testing it, I would say rank 2, something along the lines of this, and then again, whatever ability. Personally, I run Disorienting Blast. I do like Disorienting Blast just to be able to daze. You can do that, and then you can move around kind of as necessary as you want to play her. If you want to play her in rank 1, you want to play her in rank 3 or whatever, you can go about that. Really, my recommendation kind of how to play her is, it's honestly decently similar to the old Surgeon. So Incision is going to be your main ability, the ability that you use the most. And then if somebody needs heals, that's when you go for Battlefield Medicine. Keep an eye on, obviously same with the Indiscriminate Science, you clear some tokens. Keep an eye on when she's going to take big damage. If you're going against Evangelist when they get the crit, for example, or if she has a combo against the Pillagers and you know she's going to take Finishing Blow, that's when you want to pop those abilities that give her a block, just to give her a little bit of help and kind of keep her alive. It helps to have another healer on the team also to just to sort of help in case she does get crit and you weren't prepared for it and she gets popped to death's door and she's the only healer. That's really the downside of having a frontline healer, and it's kind of the same with Chaplain with Ministrations, is if your front ring healer is getting particularly hit, you have to wait until their turn to heal her. So I would definitely run another healer probably with her, at least something that can heal. You know, even something like a Cauterize could be enough. Just something, a little bit of a safety net in case you really need to kind of keep her alive. Guards could be good also because it just stops her from getting totally run over. You know, whether you have Vessel in the back, Man-at-Arms in the front, or Man-at-Arms in the back, or really whatever floats your boat as far as the way you're going about it. So you're going to be pressing, you know, Incision most of the time. If you happen to have something, she doesn't really have any ways of doing it herself other than on the back ranks. She doesn't really have any way to combo, but if you can give somebody that combos with her, you know, that'd be pretty good. Whether it be Occultist with Weakening Curse or Smokescreen or whatever. It's nice to have, you know, this probably isn't going to be your main use of combo. There's probably better uses of combo out there as far as Highwayman Pistol Shot, you know, things like that. But this is nice to have. Again, if it's one of those fights you know is going to be kind of longer, by the time the Kyurgen comes around, or by the time the second Creature Den Waves comes around, you're able to get even more value out of either Incision or Magnesium Rain. Oh, next up, we have the wonderful Alchemist. I know I joked for a while that if Alchemist didn't end up being a good path, there was going to be riots on the streets at Red Oak Studios. people are going to be very upset. I know a lot of people loved Alchemist. That is their, I think everybody has their comfort paths, their paths that they kind of plug into everything, and Alchemist is definitely one of them. That being said, and I know this is going to be, it's going to be crazy to hear, Alchemist is pretty close to as strong as it was before. The difference is it requires a little more setup, but this, I mean, it's her strongest path by far. This path does so much damage, and I'll get into why. So there's no longer, she no longer gets innate piercing on her blight abilities. She no longer has minus health, so she has the normal, what is now the 30 base health on Alchemist. So I will get into, let's get into the abilities. First of all, right off the bat, anybody that played the old Alchemist is going to be kind of weirded out for this purpose, for this reason right here. And it's Noxious Blast does not, and Plague Grenade do not do flat damage. Meaning, notice the Noxious Blast, the damage 2 to 3, even if the blight gets resisted, you still get a little damage. On Alchemist, Plague Grenade and Noxious Blast no longer do any damage. So if it gets resisted, you're kind of shit out of luck. That being said, the tools to combat that are, it has a 15% crit chance and a 20% crit chance, mastered. That's pretty crazy. It gets piercing against bleed, against bleeding targets, so that's nice. Basically, the idea, philosophically, or it's like, the idea behind Alchemist is that, in general, Plague Doctor wants to work with Dot North, but Alchemist is really the path that interacts with all dots, and you'll see into this. There's some really, really strong abilities in this path. And then when you master it, she also gets extra duration against burn. It's the same as Icker from Abomination, not doing damage. The weird ability, especially with the old crit chance that Alchemist used to get, it wasn't ridiculous to see a Noxious Blast do 5, 6, 7 damage on a crit. It wasn't uncommon at all. And now it doesn't do that damage. It does get an increased blight out of it. It's gonna be weird to get used to for the people that loved Alchemist. Hear me out. I promise you this path is strong. So Plague Grenade, again, gets the same thing. It doesn't have any damage. It does have that new cooldown of 1, but it does get piercing against bleeding targets, and it gets extra duration against burning targets also. So some nice little changes. Disorienting Blast does damage also, alongside just like how Surgeon does, and it adds a burn. So she, right off the bat, she gets some uses with other, basically with other dots. She can use other dots. And then Cause of Death. Now this Cause of Death is the big ability in this. There's Magnesium Rain's also a big ability, but Cause of Death is the big ability. Now look at this. Okay, so Cause of Death does 5 to 8, no matter what. It has a 1-turn cooldown, both mastered and unmastered. Now look at these buffs that it gets versus dotted targets. So unmastered, it ignores block against blight. It gets extra damage against bleed, and it gets 10% crit against burn. And then when you master, it gets all of these. So she works very well with other heroes that can add dots. She can add, keep in mind, she can add all 3 of these herself, meaning Incision, which is an ability that you do use on Alchemist now, which is weird. Incision, Noxious Blast, and Disorienting Blast all add bleed, blight, or burn, respectively. So you can set these up for herself. It obviously helps to have other teammates do it, but she can do it herself. And now, Magrain, the other big ability. So how this works is she, basically the ability itself burns, and then if the target is bleeding, it adds blight, and if the target is blighted, it adds bleed. So it kind of like inverts it. So basically, what you want to focus on is if you're going to use Magrain on an enemy, you want them to either be blighted or bled. So the idea is you set up, obviously she can set this up herself. She does not need other people, other heroes to do dots, but obviously it makes quicker. So the idea is you add either, the rotation, if you will, is you blight or bleed a target. It's totally preference. You know, obviously Alchemist has the better dot, or the Noxious Blast, sorry, has that better dot to it. But if it gets resisted, you're shit out of luck. And then versus Incision that actually does base damage. So you use one of these abilities, and then you Magrain to make sure that they get all 3 dots on them. Obviously, it can be resisted, but you Magrain to get all 3 dots on them, and then you Cause of Death, and you blow their ass up. So keep in mind, let's look at Mastered Cause of Death, just to break this down. Mastered Cause of Death, if you have all dots on them, so meaning after a mag rain, which is pretty easy to set up, that means it does 11 to 14 with a 15% crit chance, 30% crit chance, sorry, because it gets the bonus from burn. So it's a 11 to 14 with a 30% crit chance that ignores block and dodge. That is a crazy ability. So it's almost like, it's kind of a little like Jester, where you sort of set up for the finale, and then the finale is the big, you know, kind of like climax. Cause of Death is that, except it has a 1-turn cooldown and doesn't have a use limit or anything. Alchemist is crazy. It is such a strong path. Like I said, I think it's damn near just as strong as it was before. Which, if you would have told me that before these reworks, I would have told you there's no way. But they did keep some paths in the Steadfast Steward update similarly strong, but it does take a little bit of setup, meaning like you don't just drop them in and then round one you're one-shotting enemies. But they also made it, at least for Alchemist, they made it very, very easily to get all 3 dots, whether that be through mag rain, which is the quickest way to do it, or she can just do it herself, or she can have other heroes do it. So keep in mind, there's no corpse clear on this path, obviously, because mag rain is different. Not really a big deal. Something to mention though. What I would say, my recommendation would be actually to put her in rank 3 and then run either. I like Incision, but you run either Incision or Noxious Blast for kind of your sort of main damage. Honestly, what you could do is you could actually pivot in the middle of a Confessions or Kingdoms run, basically depending on what trinkets you get, because, you know, without doing the math or whatever, obviously depends on the resists, etc., of whatever the enemies are. But you get, if you happen to be going through a region and you happen to get extra piercing on Noxious Blast, probably better for Noxious Blast to be on. Or if you're going through and you get piercing for Incision, it's better to have Incision on. So it really doesn't matter, again, because either way, mag rain will add the other one. So basically the rotation is you either use Incision or Noxious Blast on round 1, you mag rain, which hopefully based on piercing will get all 3 dots on them, and then you Cause of Death and you just blow them up. That is the rotation if you don't have other heroes that dots for her. Obviously that would allow that to be quicker. Let's say you have Highwayman goes first, Open Vein, then you can mag rain on round 1 and do that. Basically, the skills that I would run would be this right here. So I would have her in rank 3. I would run Incision. Again, you can run Noxious Blast. Battlefield Medicine, Indiscriminate Science, obviously always free runs. And then you have Cause of Death and Magnesium Rain. There's really no need to run Disorienting Blast, in my opinion, because Magnesium Rain is already going to set the burn up itself. And there's not really much benefit. I mean, you get an increased crit chance on mag rain. There's not a ton of benefit to doing like a Disorienting Blast into Magnesium Rain. If you want to run Disorienting Blast, obviously you're more than welcome to. But if you want to try out Alchemist, I would say start with this setup, or Noxious Blast if you would like. Noxious Blast, Magnesium Rain, Cause of Death. Keep that rotation going, and then heal obviously whenever you need to. Keep in mind, Cause of Death does have a 1-turn cooldown. You can use this just to kill rank 3, by the way, because if you're running either Noxious Blast or Incision, you can't hit rank 3 like with your main damage ability. So that's worth noting. Magnesium Rain does have a 2-turn cooldown, so that's another reason why it helps to have other enemies or other allies be able to dot. So you can use Cause of Death really as much as possible. But she doesn't need anybody else with her. She can do everything herself, which honestly is pretty crazy. Okay, next, let's talk about Physician. Physician is the first path that we've seen so far that doesn't really have anything in common with the old path. You know, Surgeon is still similar in its, you know, philosophy of being a healer and being kind of tanky-er. Alchemist is similar in the sense that it has a good Noxious Blast and Plague Grenade, at least damage-wise, but it deals with more dots. And then Physician really is similar in the sense that it is like a utility kind of debuff path like it was before. But, you know, the old Physician didn't really have a lot of meat on its bones, so there's not a lot to work with. I do like new Physician, for what it's worth, so I think it's interesting, so we'll get into this. So the path skills are Noxious Blast, Incision, Ounce of Prevention, Emboldening Vapors, Disorienting Blast, and Cause of Death. So, first, let's get into Noxious Blast. So you see Noxious Blast it does the same damage, but it does one less blight, but it does add a weak token, which is cool. Weak tokens, if you have not looked through the patch notes yet, technically they got buffed because it normally, I'm trying to think how to word this. I was never super good on the math. I believe weak tokens first were minus 50% damage. So there was a situation where if you would do plus 100% damage and then a weak would take 50 from that, so it'd still be plus 50. But now weak tokens cut damage in half. Anyway, you just got to learn that they're buffed. Don't worry about it. So being able to apply these on demand every turn essentially is pretty crazy. You'll see it gets the debuff piercing when the target is comboed, and then when you master it, it will apply two weak tokens into combo. Really, really effective. I know that doesn't seem like a huge change, but again, it is a spammable every turn weak token, which, you know, in some way makes your entire team sometimes tankier if you use it in the right scenario. Again, against enemies that can get combo tokens or whatever. So a small change, but honestly an extremely effective change. A sneakily strong change, especially considering the weak token changes. Incision does the same damage and everything, but it just combos now. That's pretty much it. But it's cool. It's a nice little setup. It still bleeds. It still does the damage. Doesn't have the combo interaction. Instead, it adds combo. Nice little change. We get into Ounce of Prevention. Ounce of Prevention is barely different. The only thing that you'll notice as a difference is when you master it, instead of getting the debuff resistance, you get stress resist. So really just a preference of whether you'd rather have the debuff resist or the stress res. Just a small little change, but more tools for players to play the way that they want and get the stats that they want. I think is always good. Now, so we'll see our first crazy ability on Physician. If it seems kind of underwhelming up to this point, understandable. This is a really strong ability in my opinion. So basically it inverts one negative token per hero. So that can count on everybody. It inverts daze and stun tokens, both to speed tokens. So that's pretty cool. And then when you master it, it gets increased tokens essentially. Some people are not a huge fan of this just because it does invert only one token and it doesn't let you choose obviously which one. So if you have something like 2 vulns and 2 blinds, you know, it'll give you 1 block token instead of inverting all of them. I don't know. I mean, Footman's Grog inverts pretty well. I think this is a really strong ability. It's essentially just, what do you want to do with negative tokens? Do you want to heal them with Indiscriminate Science, or do you want to use Emboldening Vapors to invert one? I like Emboldening Vapors. I think it's a good ability. I think it's a solid ability to have on the bar. Physician in general really is just about, you can use as many or as few tools of it as you would like. If you don't want to use this Emboldening Vapors, that's totally okay. You really could just go, if you truly wanted to, Noxious Blast and Incision. If you had the right team around it, to be able to add weak tokens is nice. And to be able to add combo on demand is nice also. So you can run all these different skills, or you can really just 1 or 2 and run it kind of like a slightly different Wanderer. It's totally okay. It's totally up to you. Disorienting Blast is another ability that's really, really strong. So it hits, so you'll see this target and then it's adjacent enemies. So what that means is the target gets a shuffle and a daze, and then the adjacent targets get a shuffle or a daze. So you can, in theory, shuffle the entire team with this. And the adjacent enemies still get the effects, even if Disorienting Blast misses. So it's a really chaotic ability, and then if you master it, it adds a Vuln into that, so you can shuffle, daze, and Vuln the target, and then shuffle or daze or Vuln the other targets, and it triples the crit chance, so that's worth also. One of the things that I've said is Vuln seems like a weird one to add in there, because in my opinion, shuffling and dazing are the stronger tokens, or the stronger effects, I guess. And to add a Vuln in there, I mean, I understand the capability of a Vuln, because you could really get, you know, infinite value out of it. But to me, it feels like the worst of the 3. So, like, for the adjacent enemies, you'd rather have Shuffle or Daze, at least in my opinion. Anyways, it's a very chaotic ability. You may not know exactly what it's going to do when you throw it down, but it's a team, again, you go against, like, the Cultists or something like that. A faction that really struggles getting shuffled, and you can shuffle legitimately the entire team if you use it on rank 2 or rank 3. So, very, very strong ability, a chaotic ability. really can kind of completely change the fight in your favor. Obviously, there's a bit of randomness to it. You don't really know what it's going to do, but still a really, really strong ability. I really like this disorienting blast. Cause of Death is kind of her most unique ability, I guess, sort of. It was kind of a meme because this Cause of Death kept getting, it was getting mentioned in like every week of the experimental updates, because it was, they would talk about, oh, we made this change to Runaway, oh, and it works with the physician dot received and dot dealt. So how it works is you essentially mark a target, that target takes one more dot and deals one less dot. So again, Evangelist, something like that, you can dot them a little bit better. If you have a full dot team especially, and they deal less dot to you. So that's nice. So it's a little bit of a highway robbery on Yellow Hand kind of thing, where they deal 2 less blight, or 2 less bleed, sorry, and then it's -1 dot. And then when you master it, it triples the crit chance, lowers the cooldown by 1, and if you crit with Cause of Death, it applies both twice. So what that means is they will deal 2 less dot, and they will take 2 more dot. Now, obviously that's kind of inconsistent. There is some situation where you could, I don't know, if you could force a crit token. I don't know if it's with like Instructus or something like that. I guess Snappy Swig, to get crit tokens more often. Sometimes that would be pretty nice. But obviously this is really, really good for a full dot team. You add some extra combo, you know, the combo ability with Incision. You can do some really interesting stuff. I think Physician is one of those paths that I think it's going to take a while for us as a community to really sort of unlock its potential. Obviously, you see its potential individually with, you know, Emboldening Vapors, Disorienting Blast, Cause of Death. But I think eventually, the more time that goes on, we'll realize, like, oh, if you run this team comp with Cause of Death, you can just deal so much dots to the enemy. I mean, if you think, you know, Open Vein Mastered from Highwayman into combo plus does 6 bleed, and then you add this in there, and all of a sudden it's a 7 or an 8 bleed. Some pretty crazy numbers that you can get with this. I think it's just a matter of the community, me included, trying to figure out exactly how to go about that. So I would run her in rank 3, but you can also run her in rank 4. It just depends on, kind of like how I said with Alchemist, it just depends whether you want to run Incision or Noxious Blast kind of as your main damage. You can go both, like I said. It's just up to you. If you want to run Incision, you need to put her in rank 3, and if you want to run Noxious Blast, you can do it in rank 3 or rank 4. It doesn't matter. What I would run is I would say this, and then either Emboldening Vapors or Indiscriminate Science. Again, you could run both. This is not a super... Physician is kind of a path about how you get the value out of the abilities. It is not what abilities you run. It's just whatever abilities you decide to run, make sure you get the best value that you can out of it. I would say Surgeon is kind of the same thing. If you want to run both Emboldening Vapors and Indiscriminate Science, more power to you, but you probably do want to make sure that you know you're going to go in getting a lot of negative tokens. You know, if you're going to run Incision instead of Noxious Blast, make sure that you can get really, really good value, really effective value out of that combo. You know, if you're going to run Cause of Death, make sure you get as much value out of Cause of Death as you can. It's really completely up to you. I like Emboldening Vapors over Indiscriminate Science personally, just because, you know, it's AoE, it's kind of a fun ability, it's a new ability. There's obviously situations, you know, you think like the Hunger tokens with the Harbor's Child. Indiscriminate Science does something with that, Emboldening Vapors does not. So there are situations in which you would run either, but if you want to go just with like a start, if you haven't played Physician yet and you want to try it, I would say go this skill set, just so you can get used to kind of all the abilities. Prefer to switch out Noxious Blast if you would like, but I would say start with this, and then kind of, you're like, okay, well, I don't really like that Emboldening Vapors, I'll run Science instead. You can kind of edit it yourself and run whatever loadout you most want to run with her. So before we move on, let's talk about the Trinket Changes. So first of all, Annotated Textbook. Annotated Textbook used to just give plus 10% crit on melee skills and give plus healing given from skills, plus 50% healing given to skills when medicinal herbs were equipped. Essentially the same thing, minus the crit chance. So you'll see target ally invert 1 token or plus 1 stress. So that works on really anything really. It's just target. So you could even work like on combat items. So to be able to invert negative tokens is kind of nice. Obviously that that makes it so you can invert 2 negative tokens if you want to go like Physician. There's really one that's good on it's good on every path. It doesn't matter what path you have. Annotated Textbook is good for all of them. And then you have plus healing % given from skills when restorative item is equipped. So instead of just medicinal herbs, it is restorative item. And then they change it so the vulnerable, if first in turn order, is a 1 in 3 instead of 100%. Early Experiment, which was just kind of the busted one, just add a Noxious and you get +2 dealt. Kind of like the Alchemist one. And then now you have +1 light dealt when Noxious item is equipped. This is one of those scenarios where if you were to get this trinket kind of early in a run, maybe that's a scenario when you would want to switch, you know, for either Physician or Surgeon. That's a situation, or Physician or Alchemist, sorry. Maybe that's a situation where you would want to run. You would want to run Noxious Blast instead of Incision, something like that. Apply on crit, invert 2 negative tokens. Obviously not something that's reliable nearly as much, but she does have some pretty high crit chances, so it can be good when it plays out. Obviously this applies at the enemy, and then when she's moved by the enemy, it can give a bleed, a blight, or a burn. And Storage Room Key right here. So Storage Room Key used to give Ounce of Prevention a block, gives 2 regen to Bolting Vapors, which it still does both, but then they added +1 speed per medical gear item equipped, which is cool, and then gain on miss -1 speed for 3 turns. So pretty much just a nice little addition to Storage Room Key. Keep in mind, in Bolting Vapors, again with Physician, since the Bolting Vapors with Physician is AoE, essentially you can give a Divine Comfort from Vestal onto the entire team, and you know, if everybody has debuff, that's pretty nice. Ounce of Prevention will give everybody, her 2 blocks, and then everybody else 1 block if you use it on Surgeon. So some pretty good uses kind of out of these trinkets. So overall, Plague Doctor I like. The Plague Doctor reworks I like a lot. Surgeon I really like. Having a frontline healer, if we're just talking about Surgeon, having a frontline healer allows you for things in the back, paths in the back, whether it be current or future, where you don't necessarily need to follow the archetype of your healer being in the back. You can do things like Virtuoso or Intermezzo, Jester. You can do things like Sergeant. You can do things like Sharp Shot or Deadeye. Sharp Shot, Highwayman, Deadeye, Grave Robber. You can do these more kind of different archetypes where the backliner doesn't just have to be a healer anymore with Incision. So, or with Surgeon, sorry. So that's really nice. That opens up for some more possibilities as far as team comps and stuff go. Alchemist is goddamn near strong as it was before. Alchemist is a lot of fun. It's just one of those, you know, old Surgeon was kind of fun just because you would get 17 crits on Mastered Incision decently often. Alchemist is kind of similar. You get her strength tokens or crit tokens, and it just, Cause of Death is just such a fun ability to use. It's ridiculous. And I think it's a lot of fun too, being able to apply all dots and deal with dots. I think it's just this is definitely like her best path, in my opinion, both from a strength standpoint and just a standpoint in general of my thoughts on the reworks. And then Physician, I think, is really cool. The first Physician they came out with, the rough draft, was kind of not fully not fully cooked, if you will. But I really like this Physician. The abilities that it has, it's got a couple very obvious strong abilities, like with this Disorienting Blast, messing up the entire team, Cause of Death, taking away the enemy's ability to do as many dots, and it makes them apply more. But it also has simple changes like Incision into combo, can make for some really good setups with the rest of your team. And Noxious Blast adding a weak, like I said, it's a simple change, but it's a very, very effective change. I like Physician for what it is. Again, you can play it as kind of Wanderer, but a slightly different, or you can kind of full lean into it. Trinket Changes, I think, are pretty cool. Really just nice little buffs when you're able to get them. The inverting the negative tokens and then inverting positive tokens of the enemies, pretty cool. All right, next up, we have Runaway. So philosophically, kind of what they wanted to do with Runaway is really give her more stealth, both options and value, I guess, kind of out of it. She's very, you know, she's in theory, she's like a stealth hero a bit, but she didn't really have a lot of tools to really do that other than run and hide. But now they give her some more kind of options and some more value out of it. So we'll be able to get into it. So Backdraft. Backdraft now has a crit chance of 5% unmastered, 10% mastered, which I'll show. And it's considered a range ability and can be affected by strength or weak tokens. and then it deals. They change the numbers to 75% unmastered, or it does 75% unmastered and then 100% mastered. Sorry, typo there. Cauterize can now be used from any rank, which is cool. It previously wasn't able to use in rank 1. And then if there's no bleed, it Cauterize heals 1, like 1 single point, or 5% when it's mastered, and it still heals the same that it did before. So it's basically just to give it a little more usage. It can be used in rank 1, and then a simple heal for 1. I mean, obviously, you're kind of like, whoa, what is that? The purpose is so you can get somebody off death's door, really is what it is. So that can be nice to have. It sounds kind of dumb when you look at it. It can save you, and it's still nice to have the bar. Controlled burn, damage-wise, got a slight nerf, but it does ignore guard now, so that's nice. So you can actually choose a target better instead of having it bounce to the military shield or whatever. Dragonfly gets burn, res, piercing when stealthed, so another a little bit of stealth. Interaction, Firefly gets 10% burn, piercing when stealthed, unmastered, and then 20% when mastered. Firestarter no longer has a use limit and has a cooldown of 3 unmastered to mastered. And then Mastered Firestarter also gives her +1 burn duration for 3 turns. Ransack on Wanderer now gives Bonnie a stealth token when combo. So it used to apply a burn and adjacent burn. No longer has that. And then when you mastered, it gives her 2 stealth. So it sets up for Dragonfly interaction or Firefly or whatever. And then Searing Strike got a damage buff. Does 4 burn. And then it's +1 extra burn dealt when stealth or +2 extra burn when stealth. Philosophically, Searing Strike is your big damage on most of the paths now. It used to just be kind of an ability that didn't feel like the damage was worth running, I guess. But now, as you can see, they buff the damage, buff the burn, and then gave it extra burn dealt also. So very, very strong ability. Get used to pressing that button a little bit more. You'll see Hearthlight gets a change. I know the tooltip looks completely different. Long story short is Hearthlight removes targets to the entire team whether it hits or not, and then to everybody it hits, it lowers minus 10%, or it lowers their burn resistance by 10%. It no longer ignores dodge, so it can miss, but whether it misses or not, it'll still remove the stealth. And then if it happens to crit on a 10 or 15% chance, it is now a ranged ability when it wasn't anything before. It will apply a combo token alongside. When you master it for the entire team, it gets rid of blinds and gives burn piercing. So it looks like a very different ability. It's not. It's still very good at removing stealth. It just has a little bit, a couple extra things to it. Okay, so let's get into Arsonist. So Arsonist, I'm gonna warn you right now, is a this is a funny path. The best way that I can explain it is a ticking time bomb. It doesn't have anything in common with the old Arsonist other than the self-burn aspect. Basically, they were like, what if we took the self-burn aspect of Arsonist and gave it, it's basically, it just gave it steroids, and now it's a full-on beast of what it was. So it's a really interesting path. It's a very complicated path. If you haven't played it before. It's a very punishing path, but its put out as far as damage goes is pretty crazy. It's definitely the highest risk path in the game, even more than Intrepid with Duelist. It's a very high risk path, very interesting though. So let's get into the passive first of all. The path itself is led by this passive a little bit, so keep in mind. Arsonist self-burn skill effects cannot be resisted and are affected by dot modifiers. So she self-burns herself now, basically on abilities instead of turn start like it was before. Now she does it with her abilities. So, round end. If Arsonist has burn, gain +1 burn dealt and +2 speed, stacking up to 3 times. Arsonist buffs are lost if the Arsonist has no burn when the round ends. So typically this will come from her own burns, so which are within the abilities. But this +1 burn dealt does count on her also. So normally you'll see her paths burn her for 2. It can burn her for anywhere up to 5. So you see the beginning of this kind of ticking time bomb, obviously with a positive to it because she can plant a lot of burn. But yeah, you see the ticking time bomb of this. So Searing Strike and Firefly are essentially the same, a little bit different. They have the same damage values, crit values. They do not have the stealth interactions. What they have instead is this self burn damage you see right there. So when she uses Searing Strike, it will burn her for 2, and again, that is affected by the Arsonist self-burn, so she can burn herself for anywhere up to 5. It is Arsonist is meant to be more of a middle rank, meaning ranks 2 and 3 path more so than anything. So you'll see that with Searing Strike, you can use in 2 and 3 now. Firefly, again, same thing. It keeps the same rank, but it loses the stealth interaction and gains instead a self burn to her. Now, Hearthlight. Hearthlight is your safety net button. It is your oh shit button. It is nothing like the Wanderer. What it is basically she burns herself, and then once the burn gets too strong on her, you can transfer it to a target, and then it heals her per Arsonist buff. So when it says Arsonist buff, it means passive. So how many passive stacks that she has of the burn and speed dealt. So it heals her 5% per buff, or if you master it, it heals her 10% per buff. Dragonfly also is the same as Searing Strike or Firefly in the sense that it loses the combo interaction, but there's one unique thing about Dragonfly that I want to point out, and it's that third line there where it says gain on hit, burn 2. So how it works is Searing Strike and Firefly, whether it hits the target or not, it'll do that 2 burn. How Dragonfly works is it's based on the targets that it hits. So that means dodges and blinds can affect this. So if she has a blind token, she misses both, she'll get no self-burn. If she hits one target, either because it's a size 2 or because it's one target and then like maybe the other dodges, she'll get a 2 burn. If she hits 2 targets, she'll get 4 burn. So when you talk about taking advantage of this self-burn aspect, which I'll show in Firestarter and Backdraft especially, technically the highest put-out of self-burn is with Dragonfly, and of burn in general. But you do run into a situation where, right, if you're relying on Dragonfly for your main damage, if the enemies have dodge, or if you have blind, or you have a pit fighter or a knight, meaning that there's a size 2 in the front ranks that you only hit 1, technically it cuts down on that burn output. So what does she do with this self burn alongside Hearthlight's based on the passive, not the burn itself? But with Backdraft, you'll see it. What this does is what Firestarter does. Sorry, is it picks a target, it copies their burn. So let's say they have a 3 burn over 4 turns, brings it to the Runaway, and she also absorbs the heal or the burn of the rest of her team. So it does 2 things. So you pick a target, copies their burn onto Runaway, and then it takes everybody else's burn on her team and gives it to her. So why would you want to do that? You'll see here with Backdraft. And then mastering it lowers its cooldown, lose her cooldown, and give it a stealth token. The main idea behind giving it a stealth token is making it so the enemies can't hit her, basically while she has this big burn on. Now, Backdraft is the big ability. Think kind of like Jester, how you kind of like set up for Finale, and then Finale is like the big climax. That's essentially what Backdraft is. Now, Backdraft can be used in the 2 and 3 ranks. I'll try to explain this. I hope this makes sense. So, it can hit the entire team. As you can see there with the targeting, it can hit the entire team, but it only hits the targets that are burned. So if it's one target, it doesn't matter how much burn they have, as long as they have a single burn in any way. So if you have 1 enemy burned, it'll only hit 1 enemy. If you have 4 enemy burns, it'll hit all of them. So you can imagine like Magnesium Rain, for example, with Plague Doctor. That's a good way to mark the entire team. You're talking like Zealous Accusation with Crusader, whether it be she hits the front, or she hits the back and then Crusader hits the front, or vice versa if it's Banneret, blah blah blah. So what it does is instead of taking the enemy's amount of burn and using that as the damage dealer, or the damage value, sorry, which is what Backdraft does normally on Wanderer, this takes her damage. So the more burn that she has, the more burn that she deals, or the more damage that she deals, sorry. So she needs burn on her in order to deal damage to the enemies. So unmastered, it's 50% of her damage, and then mastered, it's 75% damage. And you'll see after she uses Backdraft, it doubles the remaining burn. So to give you sort of an idea of how to play this, let me point out sort of what a rhythm of abilities that you would use. So first of all, one thing about Arsonist is really in order to get enough value out of it to make the self burn not be scary, because it is, again, it's a very risky path. You almost can't run your comfort ability. So meaning, like, for me, no matter where I play Runaway, I'm running, no matter how I play her, no matter what rank, whatever, I'm running Smokescreen or Cauterize, or both, or like Controlled Burn. Those would be like the 3 comfort abilities. For Arsonist, because you need to make sure you're dealing out a ton of damage, otherwise the self-burn is going to just wreck her. So you kind of can't run those abilities. What I would say is something like this. So let's say a rotation that you would do is you would either Searing Strike or you would Firefly for, let's say, 1 or 2 rounds. So let's say Searing Strike one target, Firefly another target. You could Firestarter one of them, so you could pull their burn or copy their burn onto her to give her more damage, and then Backdraft. Again, Backdraft is your big damage. It's like your climax kind of ability. It's your finale, sort of. So the idea is the more that you're ramping up the burn, the riskier it is, but the more damage that you do. So you kind of have to decide as you play it, as you are playing it, how much are you willing to risk? So her hitting Death's Door honestly isn't that bad. To play this path at its peak, you kind of need to hit Death's Door. You kind of have to not be scared of hitting Death's Door, because Backdraft is not going to be affected by the weak that you get from hitting Death's Door, so that's nice. But it does run into situations where she's taking a lot of damage because of the self burn. You know, let's say just after 2 turns. So she'll Searing Strike, she gets 2, gets a passive from her, or a buff from her passive, so that means it gains 1 burn dealt. So basically after 2 Searing Strike attacks or 2 Firefly attacks, she's taking 5 damage per turn. And then obviously if you press Backdraft, that doubles that, or if you use Firestarter to pull burn onto her, that gives her even more burn. So she's taking a lot of damage. And as stupid as this sounds, you kind of forget when you're playing this, because it's its own mini game. It's like a game within the game. You kind of forget that the enemies can attack her also. So not only are you taking this self-burn for like 5 damage maybe a turn, but the enemies are also hitting her. So that will slow down your ability to really commit to this path. A way to mitigate that, basically the best ways to mitigate this path are guarding her in some way, so that at least Arsonist isn't, you know, when you're calculating the damage, you know she's taking 5, 6, 7 damage per turn. It's easy to obviously pay attention to, because that's the damage that she's taking. But as soon as enemies like attack her a couple times, it throws off your whole rhythm, because she's going to hit Death's Door faster than you want her to, etc. So guarding her will help reduce that. That at least the enemies, it allows you to control the chaos a little bit more, as opposed to the enemies hitting you also. Keep in mind that a way of mitigating the damage done to her, because she needs, in order to keep this passive up, she needs to be burning in some way. So really something like Administrations or like Battlefield Medicine, getting rid of burn isn't really the best way to play it, because it puts a full stop on her damage potential. So the best way kind of to mitigate the burn damage done to her really is regen, whether it be through Divine Comfort with Vestal, or Undying is the best way to go, because it mitigates that damage a little bit. Because again, if she's burning herself for 8 per turn, you don't want to get rid of that 8, because that's a lot of damage, but you would like to mitigate it a little bit, even if it was with a little bit of regen. That's a good way of going about it. But if you're thinking that this sounds like a path for psychopaths, it's because it is. It's a crazy path. It can deal a ton of damage, as you can imagine, with Backdraft hitting potentially the entire team, depending on how you go about it. It can do a lot. It can do a lot of damage. This is a really, really effective path, but it's scary. So keep in mind, again, so technically if you want to output the most damage possible, you want to spam Dragonfly as much as possible, but again, you do have to worry about like size 2s and stuff. So if you want to try out the path at its like strongest, it would be something like this. Whoops. Something like this, because Dragonfly is your biggest put out. So you mark 2 targets there, hopefully the front 2 targets. You can Firefly for like a third, or hit a rank 3 or hit 4, and then you can Backdraft if that feels like enough damage. If it doesn't feel like enough damage, then you can Firestarter and then Backdraft next turn. And then eventually, once enough enemies are done, Hearthlight is especially a good ability to use at the end of combat, just to make sure that you're not, you know, if you're going from a node to a road combat, just making sure that you're not starting that fight with 2 health, you know, on the Runaway. So this is a good, again, it's a safety net button to pop her passive and really kind of start over. But it's also a nice It's a nice way to just like end fights. So this is it's an interesting path. It definitely is. As weird as this sounds, also, this is almost a Confessions path, not a Kingdoms path. Because with Kingdoms, because you're not starting with the 5 abilities that you want, imagine you're running this, but the random abilities that you get is, say, like something like this, right? Where you have Smokescreen, your only burn that you're putting out is Controlled Burn. That's not going to be very good. Or if you have, imagine if you don't have Backdraft, right? You need, in order to make Arsonist's risk worth it, you need to have you need to have all the tools at your disposal, which makes it more of a Confessions path because it allows you to start whatever skills you want. Also, you can't play this path scared. You kind of have to commit, and that means not being scared to hit Death's Door. But in Kingdoms, obviously you get the fatigue from hitting Death's Door, so you at least up to 20% is when it maxes out. So you really don't want to play this in Kingdoms. My advice, if you did want to play this in Kingdoms, it would be to play her as like Wanderer or as like some other path until you get all the skills that you want, and then switch her to Arsonist. And as far as like how to stop her from getting a fatigue, there's kind of nothing you can do about it. You kind of just have to lean into it. Again, this is definitely a psychopath's a path. It is riskier than Intrepid. It definitely is, because Intrepid, the enemies will kill you. In this, you'll kill yourself if you're not careful. So it's an interesting one. It's not for everybody. I would say it's at least worth trying at some point. Probably again with these 5 abilities, it's worth trying. Get your own opinion on it. It may not be for you, but it's still a funny path. Okay, so next up we have Survivor. Survivor is pretty much an overhaul of a path. The only thing it really has in common is this heal passive right here, where normally she would start with 2 dodges and a speed token. She doesn't get that anymore, but she does have, in some ways, still kind of a dodge mechanic kind of with her. So how it works is her path passive with this is after she heals, whether that be through regen or any sort of healing, there's a 50% chance of getting a dodge, and if she doesn't get a dodge, there's a 25% chance of getting a dodge plus. Whenever she heals, and when her HP is under 75% after the heal, is when she can potentially get a dodge token. So it's actually nice. It pops more often than you think. Just her ability to kind of heal. It's a really nice passive. But again, fundamentally, not really. Pretty much it's a completely new path. It inverts some of her abilities, as far as just the way that they work. Runaway, honestly, or Survivor specifically, is a really well-rounded path. It's one of those paths, Crusader is kind of the poster boy of can fit into any comp. Survivor honestly does that damn near as well. Survivor, you can plug into any comp, whether the comp really deals with her super well or gets a ton of value out of what she does. Either way, it's one of those that's going to play mostly the same based on where you put her, and it's going to do a lot of things. It does a lot of things well, and a lot of things that other heroes can get advantage of. So Survivor got a really, really big glow up on. So let's get into the comparisons of comparing it to Wanderer. So you see it's got the same ranks. So it's got different stealth interaction now. So instead of getting the +1 burn dealt, it has plus 50% crit per stealth token, and it removes the stealth after you use it. So long story short, the idea with this path is that you stealth her and then decide what to do with those stealth. When she's stealthed, you can use up those crit token or those stealth tokens in some way, and it's just a matter of how you use it. Steering Strike is one of the ways on how to do it. So it gives you it still gets the combo interaction of getting extra burn to it, and if it crits, whether it be through the 100% crit through this or crit token or natural crit on 5% or whatever, it gets +1 burn duration. So that's nice. And then when you buff it, it gets a little bit of damage, a little bit of extra burn. So one of the main ways that you can actually get stealth with her now is with Smokescreen. So Smokescreen now, instead of hitting a target and blinding them and comboing them and vulnerabling them, it actually marks her, and then whoever hits her gets a blind or a blind in a combo, depending on whether you mastered it or not. So it's a taunt now. So what it does is it moves her forward and removes the stealth, however many stealth tokens she has. And then think of it like a more mark. So when more When Flagellant uses more and more, every time that he gets hit between that time that he casted it and the time in his next turn, he will get a pain token. So it's the same thing. So she marks herself every time that she gets hurt, every time that she gets hit between this scenario and her next turn, it applies a blind to them. And then when she gets her next turn, she immediately gets 2 stealth. And then when you master it, it lowers the cooldown and it also applies a combo. So you can apply a lot of stealth or a lot of blind and combo to the enemy team. It's a really, really effective ability, especially if you know like AoE is coming and you know she's going to get hit. And then through this ability, you would use Smokescreen. She would get the combo at the beginning of her next turn, or the stealth, sorry. She would get the stealth at the beginning of her next turn, and then you would decide if Searing Strike is a way that you want to use it, or there's going to be a couple other tools on this. So it's a slight different. That's kind of why I said it was like inverted. Instead of picking one target to Smokescreen, it basically allows it to potentially Smokescreen the entire team and give them blinds and combos. Keep in mind, this can run into the more effect, where you go, she goes last one turn, you use it, and then she goes first next turn, and basically doesn't get to blind anybody. She still stealths either way, so that's nice. But you can run into that, so keep that in mind if you're using it like at the end of a round. One of the other things you can use with the stealth tokens is you can use Hearthlight. So what Hearthlight does is it heals 10% per stealth token. It gives a regen. It gives a 1 regen over 3 turns per stealth token, and it removes it. And then if you master it, it gives a 2 regen instead of a 1 regen, and then it takes away stealth per stealth token, or it takes away stress per stealth token. Too many S words. Keep in mind, you can use this on other heroes too. So, if you have Grave Robber or something like that, this could be nice. A Dead of Night into Hearthlight could be really good. Could pretty much full healer. 95% of the time that you use this ability, probably you're using it on Runaway, but it is kind of nice that she can use it on other targets in case. Like, you can set that up for, if you give her Shimmering Powders, the combat item that can stealth, you can basically have an on-demand heal of them, and on-demand regen, so that could be kind of nice. You can Shimmering Powder them, and then heal them off of that, so kind of a nice way to get off Death's Door, a little more effective than, like, Cauterize, although that can do that too. And for the last path skill, Ransack. So it's an ability that you can use whether you are stealthed or not, but if you do use it when you're stealth, it steals 1 positive token per stealth token that you have from the enemy, or it steals 2 positive tokens per stealth token that she has. So that means you can steal 4 positive tokens from an enemy. Obviously, it's not very often that they're going to have that, but either way, and because it ignores block and dodge when it's mastered, you can steal those too. So, basically, long story short with this path, although you can do it with run and hide also, Smokescreen I would say is probably the main way of doing it, just because it's more effective. So you can Smokescreen, hand out as many combos and blinds as you can, and then beginning of next turn, all right, depending on how the fight is going, what do you do with that? What do you do with that stealth? So with those 2 stealth tokens, do you Searing Strike for 100% crit chance? Do you Hearthlight for a heal to her? Or do you Ransack for stealing positive token? Keep in mind, this Ransack removes stealth either way, whether there's tokens or not. So if you do use that at all when you're stealth, you're going to lose that either way. So that's essentially kind of like how the path works. This gives you 3 different tools. You can either be aggressive with stealing positive tokens, aggressive with damage, or defensive with kind of healing her. So it seems like a pretty simple change. It kind of is, but honestly, like I said, it's a really, really well-rounded path. It can fit with everything. Pretty much every team that you're going to run is going to have some sort of combo interaction. So that allows the combo part of Smokescreen to be very, very good. The blinds are obviously always nice to hand out, and crits that you know are coming, especially when you can get the +1 burn duration on of it, can be really, really, really nice. So Survivor I really, really like. It's a simple, relatively simple path, but honestly it's really, really strong. So what you could go is you could go something like, honestly, as long as you're running these, Dragonfly maybe for the last one. You could get, if you want to use, this would be a good way to do it, because if you want to use the stealth token just to keep her stealthed, since all 3 of these abilities remove the stealth, Dragonfly might be a good one to clear some tokens and get some piercing on, and potentially apply more combo. That might be a good one to run, just so you can hold on to the stealth a little bit more instead of getting rid of it immediately. You can really use whatever you want for your 5th ability. I tend to go Dragonfly. Yeah, I would probably put her in rank 2, and then yeah, I would run Dragonfly just as like a 5th ability to move her back a little bit. Not for really any reason, just to move her back. If you wanted to, you could put her in rank 3 and then run like Firefly instead, because Firefly again would give you another option to not use up the stealth token, but instead get value from piercing. So you could do that. Although I would argue Searing Strike, the guaranteed crit on Searing Strike is so strong that you probably want to do that. I would say this is probably the most of the paths that come out with. I would say this one's probably the most rigid in the skills that you're using. This is pretty. I think this is pretty well-rounded loadout and a way to basically get the best value out of the path. If you didn't want to run Dragonfly, you could run Run and Hide and give her even more stealth, so that with that stealth you can crit even more often. That's a better option if you want to play around the token stealing and the crit a little bit more. Again, I like Dragonfly just for a little bit of like AoE, you know, get the value out of the stealth without immediately getting rid of it. But yeah, you can play it however you want. For the most part, I would say this is probably the most rigid path in the way that you should run it in order to get value. Obviously, you could throw. You definitely, in my opinion, there's really no reason to run. Reason to not run these 4 abilities, and then you can run again whatever you would like. Run and Hide. It's probably the best for the stealth interaction. Dragonfly is best to hold on to the stealth, and then Cauterize obviously is Cauterize. But yeah, it's a really solid path. It may not have the super interesting identity that like Arsonist does or something like that, but honestly a really well-rounded path. Sometimes with some of these paths you don't really have to do, sometimes you kind of just got to give them fun interactions. You don't necessarily always have to make them super like a completely new change, but I really like this glow up from old Survivor to new Survivor. All right, so last but not least, Orphan. Orphan, they kind of kept, fundamentally it was supposed to be a rank flexible path, which it kind of was. But in practice, mostly what you do is you'd put her in rank 1 and spam Ransack, or you would put her in rank 4 and spam Firefly. So they kept, though, the kind of rank flexibility, I guess, if you want to call it that, of Orphan, which I thought, honestly, was kind of surprising. This definitely isn't Arsonist level of it's kind of tough to understand, but it is, it does have very different ways that you can play Orphan. And you kind of got to like really understand the path as a fundamental level to kind of understand how to play it at like its best. But hey, that's what I'm here for. So it is like Arsonist in the sense that you play around the passive. You do have to pay attention to the passive. It is a kind of like a mini game within a mini game kind of thing. Like you really have to pay attention to what's going on when you're playing with her during the fight. At least if you want to get like the real value out of it, you can just plant it in a rank and Firefly. This essentially, Orphan kind of, it better, the old playstyle, like people would either play Arsonist rank 4 and spam Firefly, or Orphan rank 4 and spam Firefly. And as you'll see, Orphan, if you like that sit in rank 4 and spam, Orphan sitting in rank 4 has similar buffs and is probably a little better at it. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can play Orphan. I'll get into that. So the first thing is round start current rank is stable. So it will tell you in the little yellow triangle where it tells you your buffs. It'll tell you what rank is stable. So bear with me on this one. So at round end, basically at round end for this first little paragraph here, round end, it checks if you are in the rank that is stable. So if you start the round in rank 2, you need to end the round in rank 2 in order to get these buffs. You can move around in between the round. So you can go to rank 2. Let's say you can go to, if you're stable in rank 2, you can Dragonfly into 3, but as long as you get moved into 2 by the end of the round, you still get the buff. So what this buff is if you're in it for 1 round, you get +1 burn dealt on all your abilities. And if you're in it for 2 rounds, then you get +1 duration. So in total, you get +1 burn dealt and +1 duration. For every, you keep that as long as you end a round in the stable rank. So you can move around in between the round, but as long as you end it there, you're fine. That's one buff. And then there's also a separate buff where when moving, gain +1 damage, stacking up to 2. These buffs are lost on round end if the Orphan is not moved. So, the way to play Orphan is you can lean into the first half of it. This first paragraph here, where you want to keep her in the same rank. You can play into the second one, where you just need to move her once per round, or you can play into both. Playing into both obviously is extremely effective, but it's very hard, requires a lot of attention. But I'll get into basically how to play all 3 of those play styles. So do you want to lean into the burn? Do you want to lean into the damage? Or do you want to lean into both? Realistically, you're probably going to lean into one of these two. Either to the burn, you want to sit her in the same rank, and have her be like artillery, or you want to move her. So, first of all, let's get into the changes. So the path skills on here: Searing Strike, Firefly, Smokescreen, Ransack, Dragonfly. Okay, so let's get into the skill changes. So the path passives or the path skills, are Searing Strike, Firefly, Smokescreen, Ransack, Dragonfly. So first of all, let's go into Searing Strike. The Searing Strike has a little bit less damage on the top end. It no longer has combo interaction, and the stealth interaction now is a secondary check of burn resistance. So it will do the 2 burn, and then it will do the 1 burn if she is stealth. These are separate checks. So both can be resisted, both can be not resisted, or one can be resisted, and the other isn't. So these are both buffed by extra burn and extra burn duration. So let's say she's been in the stable rank for 2 rounds. She gets +1 burn dealt, +1 duration. That will turn this into 3 burn over 4 turns and 2 burn over 4 turns. And then obviously you talk about like Snappy Swig that adds 1 burn. It does that also. So, and then the damage, obviously the damage is the damage. If you have the full +2 stacks, it'll be a 5 to 8 or 6 to 9 damage. Firefly is the same thing as Searing Strike in the sense that it no longer has a combo interaction, and then the stealth interaction is as a secondary check of their secondary potential burn. And then now, Smokescreen stealthed her, so it allows another form of her being able to stealth herself, and instead of a Vuln on Mastery, it is a weak token, both mastered and unmastered, and then she gets a second stealth token if she crits Smokescreen. Look at the crit chances are doubled too, by the way. 10% unmastered, 20% mastered. Pretty crazy. So this at least makes it so if the blind, basically it doesn't blind the enemy, it will still weaken them. So at least you're taking a little less damage. Ransack, the stealth interaction with this is that it pierces their move res a little bit, so it pierces 10% if you're stealthed, and if it's mastered, it pierces 20%, and also it combos now. So instead of having combo interaction, it sets up combo, kind of similar to Physician Precision. And Dragonfly, again, loses in the same way that Searing Strike and Firefly, it loses the stealth interaction, but instead it gets 2 separate checks of basically burns there that are both affected by the passives. Okay, so if you are interested in playing Orphan, I would say refer to this guide, because I talk about basically every play style that you could want to play with Orphan. So there are 2 different ways to lean into the burn aspect of it. So the +1 burn and +1 burn duration by her keeping her in the same rank. You can do that either with Searing Strike as your main damage ability or Firefly as your main damage ability. If you want to lean to the damage aspect of it, you can do that. If you want to lean into if you want to try to do both, you can do that also. The damage and burn oriented is very worth it. Don't get me wrong. It is tough to set up though. It is tough to set up. So first of all, let's talk about, let's say you really like Searing Strike. You want to put her in Searing Strike. So again, she can use Searing Strike in 3 now. So probably what you're running, if you're trying to burn out, if you're trying to have as much burn as possible, you put her in rank 3, and you're trying to keep her there. You don't want her to be moved by your allies or the enemies. You want to get the extra value out of the burn, that +1 burn dealt and the +1 burn duration. So I would say probably Searing Strike, Smokescreen, Cauterize, Controlled Burn, and Firefly. It allows you to have both Searing Strike and Firefly as it gives you basically you can hit every rank. Smokescreen allows you to stealth without moving her out of position, so that'd be kind of nice. And Controlled Burn obviously is Controlled Burn. It's nice in general. You can go, if you would like to go Run and Hide and Ransack instead of Firefly, you can do that. It will reset your passive, but you can do that if you would like. Again, as I was talking about, rank 4 Orphan or rank 4 Arsonist. That's essentially, it essentially runs the same. I would say Firefly, Smokescreen, Cauterize, Run and Hide, and then like Hearthlight kind of is the last one. Because Hearthlight again, you know, still gets rid of stealth for the entire team, and it can clear you know, dodge tokens. So that's nice. This allows you really good effectiveness with Run and Hide, because Run and Hide obviously not only stealths her for Firefly value, but it basically stops her from being moved, because she's going to be stealth, so she can't be pulled, and it's not going to make her restart her buffs. So that can be nice to kind of keep that going. Damage oriented. Basically, the idea is all you need to do is move her once around. So that's it. Once per round, whether it be she moves her, or the enemies move her, or an ally moves her. So the best way to go about this is you want to press, honestly, Searing Strike is a lot of damage with the extra damage. So again, you're talking, you know, 6 to 9 damage with a 10% crit chance and burn alongside it. So that's pretty good damage. So all you got to do is keep that up. So ideally, if you're playing it like actually perfectly, what you want to do is have a ally with her that can move both forward and backwards. We're talking like Unchained. We're talking like Sharp Shot can do it with double tap. New Aspirant can do it. Spoilers. Something along those lines. Or obviously you can do the same thing with Jester. It's not important that she stays in the stable rank. You're not leaning into the burn aspect of it, because it's a lot of effort to try to move her and then also move her back. So, and it's you have to pay attention quite a bit. Like when you're playing it, it is a game within a game. So this is the easiest way to do it and get a lot of value is, yeah, you really only got to move her once, whether it be she can do it herself with Dragonfly or Run and Hide or Ransack. But basically, Searing Strike is going to be your highest damage output. So you want to play her, you want to dance her in the middle and be able to Searing Strike as much as possible. Now, for the damage and the burn oriented. So you run the same skills here that you would run if you were just doing the damage oriented. Basically, the idea is you can't really, unless you run a full shuffle team around it, which you definitely can do, don't get me wrong, but basically this is, you're going to Dragonfly, and it's going to add a little bit of extra damage. So Dragonfly, you know, if you look at the damage values, it's 1 to 3. So if you give the 2 damage to that, it's 3 to 5, which is not too bad, and it's going to get the extra. You're going to have the burn and the damage from this playstyle. So ideally, you would want to be able to Searing Strike, but in order to do that, you would need her to move outside of her rank, her stable rank, and then back into her stable rank. For what it's worth, with the damage oriented, it doesn't really matter what her stable rank is, as long as she ends up moving back to it through the, as long as she's moving in any way, essentially. So the damage and burn oriented. So with this, you are talking, if she's not stealthed, Master Dragonfly, you're talking 3 to 5 damage with a 4 burn over 4 turns on 2 different targets. That is a lot of output. So what you're going to do is basically, you're going to have to use Dragonfly with that. So you're going to start her in rank 2, you're going to Dragonfly, and then whatever hero you're using to also move her, whether that be Jester, Sharp Shot, you're going to Dragonfly with her, and then that whoever you moved into rank 2 is going to move backwards, and she's going to end up moving, which keeps the Orphan damage up, and she's going to end up staying in the stable rank because it checks at the end of the round. So that's the best way to do it. It's very effective, but you got to pay attention, because if you lose the stable rank and it starts over, you're kind of caught. You're kind of caught with your pants down. The speed needs to be in favor, and Dragonfly is basically the ability that you're going to be using the most. What you could do, maybe, if you had the right, you could build a comp around this, is play it like that, and then if you just happen to lose your stable rank buffs, if that resets, just play it like normal damage Orphan. It would be just like Searing Striking, making sure she moves a little bit. So as you can see, complicated path similar. I'm not gonna say the same. Complicated path similar to Arsonist, but with many different ways to play it, which is what the old Orphan was. So it's kind of cool that they kept that kind of fundamentally pretty similar, because I thought for for sure there was no way to do that other than giving her just kind of like weird rank buffs that she had before. So let's talk about her trinket changes. So carved toy was if she stealth, she gets 50% crit chance. They changed this completely, especially essentially. So the new carved toy is plus 15% crit if she has stealth. Not super useful on like Survivor, for example, since if she has 2 stealth tokens, she's already has 100% crit, but is nice in general on her other paths just because of the amount of value that you get, the amount of times that you're stealthing with her. And then plus 25% resistance piercing, debuff resist when the target's burning. This is one that's just good on, it's good on every path. Gain when moved by enemy, either daze or taunt. Obviously those are pretty brutal, but if you're playing into this, she's probably stealthed a decent amount, which means the gain when moved by enemy hopefully doesn't matter nearly as much. But a really good well-rounded trinket that can work, and you can get value pretty easily out of every on every path. So Pile of Ash still stays kind of similar to the same, the when moving. So when moving, either you get a dodge or a dodge plus, and then apply to attacker when missed, shuffle. That can be kind of crazy. Every time that basically, whether it be through the dodge or blinds, as long as they miss, as long as they go to attack Runaway and they miss, you can shuffle them. So that can be pretty crazy. Obviously some fights, you know, boss fights and stuff, it maybe won't be a big deal, but it can be a big deal in the right fight. And then when she's hit, she gets knocked back 1. And then Knitted Blanket, kind of the same thing, not really anything that it was before. It was a pretty busted trinket anyways. So when she gets when she resists a burn, she gets a stealth, which can be nice. Really, whatever path she is, you're going to get some stealth interaction. So that can be nice. Although obviously, because she can't resist her own Arsonist burn, you're probably really only getting true value out of that, out of the sprawl, but that's okay. And then +1 burn dealt when target has negative token. So it's essentially this second line is essentially a conditional snappy swig. At least the top value of it, the +1 burn dealt, can be kind of nice. And then with stress damage, chance for a burn. So pretty well-rounded trinkets overall. You can get some good value out of them. There's not really one of them that's like super better than the others. It really just depends on how you're playing and what like true value you're getting out of those. Okay, now the Occultist. So first of all, let's talk about Wanderer. Some of the small changes basically that Wanderer got changed. Demon's Pull, they added Demon's Pull. Used to, when you master it, it would stun with the 2 unchecked power tokens, and it used to clear corpses no matter what. They swapped those. So basically, whether it's mastered or unmastered, you get the stun with unchecked power tokens, but Demon's Pull now only clears corpses when you master it. Man, Demon's Pull was my corpse clear more often than not. So not a huge fan of that, to be honest. Is what it is. Weird reconstruction. So weird is changed on every path. Both weird and malediction. They are now different on every path. There isn't like a Wanderer version that applies to other ones. If you're curious, Aspirant gets the old dot malediction. Basically, weird is the same values across every path. So like Ritualist no longer has increased healing, but every path has its own. When you master weird and have 2 unchecked power tokens, it still does the 100% crit, but now each has its own basically thing that it does. So weird is essentially, malediction is completely different on every path. Weird reconstruction is essentially the same every path, but with one little bonus. So philosophically, what did they kind of change about Occultist? Basically, they gave him different tools. The paths are definitely different as far as unchecked power goes. Every path gets unchecked power token a little more, I would say, and there's definitely more ways of getting unchecked power tokens. So it's really kind of a skill expression sort of thing. That would say is like philosophically, I guess, is probably the biggest change that they made with Occultist. So let's talk about the unchecked power token cost now. So on most paths, keep an eye on it, and I'll try to point it out. Unmastered, typically the unchecked power token abilities, meaning like Malediction, Anamnesis, Burning Stars. Typically they take 3 unchecked power tokens unmastered and 2 mastered. So you have to master it in order to lower the cost. It does create a little bit of a clunkiness, to be honest, where you get stuck on 2 for a while, but there's a bunch of ways to get unchecked power tokens. they definitely upped the ways that you can get unchecked power tokens on every path. So not a huge deal, but it is if you really like a malediction or an anamnesis on a particular path, keep in mind that you're gonna have to you're gonna have to master it in order to really use it, which creates this weird sort of, I don't want to say late game, but like later game, sort of like hero with occultist sometimes, where he feels a certain way that maybe sometimes can be kind of frustrating until you get some mastery points, and then it's less frustrating. So he definitely becomes a mastery. I don't want to say mastery hungry, but he definitely benefits from mastery a lot more than he kind of did before. So the unchecked power token burn, it's 100% chance, and it burns a 1 to 3 based on the amount of unchecked power tokens you have, but it can be resisted. So essentially, the old, the unchecked power used to not be resistible. It now is. So that means like heat shield is pretty good, or anything that allows you to resist burn is nice. It's essentially what the old Arsonist was. So let's get into some of the changes for the Wanderer versions of these. Abyssal Artillery has a 10% crit chance now, both mastered and unmastered. It can give you an unchecked power token if it crits. So 10% on 2 targets honestly does crit more often than you think, although it is, obviously kind of unreliable. It's a 66% chance, and then when you master it, it's a guaranteed chance when it crits. It no longer has the stun aspect to it. You'll see as we get into all of these changes, really, it's about giving players different ways of getting these unchecked power tokens, essentially, is what it is. You can do it in a few different ways. So Binding Shadows, another aspect that they gave kind of occultists in general is dealing with stealth. You'll see in a second here with Weird on Wanderer, he can give stealth to somebody, but Binding Shadows ignores stealth. I believe on every path without the top of my head. You'll also see, by the way, the unchecked power tokens are blue now. They did that because they switched up some changes. So it's a 50% chance to get a unchecked power token when you use Binding Shadows if he's not stealthed. If you stealth into combo, it gives it, or if you use Binding Shadows into combo, it gives him a stealth. And if you are stealthed and you hit into combo, it gives him an unchecked power token. But you can't just constantly hit into combo and stay stealth, because you'll see it ignores the additional stealth if you are currently stealthed. So Binding Shadows still has that chance of getting the unchecked power token, but instead of lowering the debuff resist, it gives him stealth, or gives him a 100% chance for unchecked power token if he is stealth. So Anamnesis, you'll see small buff to Anamnesis, but honestly really, really nice. So first of all, the crit chance is 10% when it's mastered, which again, 10% on 4 targets, pretty crazy. And it shuffles both mastered and unmastered. So Anamnesis, honestly, I really like Anamnesis. It was a good ability, pretty much only on Aspirant. But Anamnesis is an effective ability now. Being able to be used in the 3 rank sets up some more opportunities for you to be able to use it. And more often than another thing too about Anamnesis is it kind of, especially if you ever wanted to use it, you kind of had to use it round 1 or bust, like round 1 or round 2, because it wasn't really worth it using if there was like 2 enemies left. This shuffle does, now that it adds a shuffle, it does add for some potential value to it though. If you have 3 enemies left, or if you have 2 enemies left, you still could use it. It's worth a slot in some situations. It used to be pretty niche. It's worth a slot in some ways. So Burning Stars, you'll see also with Anamnesis here, you'll see the 3 unchecked power tokens unmastered, 2 unchecked power tokens mastered. Same thing with Burning Stars here. Burning Stars no longer ignores block on the Wanderer version of Burning Stars unless it's mastered, and it no longer combos. Burning Stars, really effective ability, a lot of damage. Not a huge deal, in my opinion. It not increasing the damage is a little weird, but it's still a 27 damage on crit, counting strike tokens too. So still a really effective ability. So Malediction again. This Malediction that you see with the dots gets Aspirant essentially gets the new version of this a little bit updated. This Malediction in particular on Wanderer, again, like I said, it is different for every path. This one, you'll see it's 2 unchecked power tokens no matter what. So what it does is it combos the targets, and then every time you hit that target, it reapplies the combo. So you're talking something like Deadeye would be really good with that, because she gets the extra crit. You're talking about you know, Highwayman pistol shot, although you're probably not going to chain stuns because of the extra stun resist. Anything like that, really. Anything that gets a lot of value out of combo. I mean, if you want, you know, extra damage with Hellion or Crusader, if you want extra healing with Man-at-Arms. So there is a use for this. There is a use for this. And it's a very just effective ability. It's for 3 rounds, not even 3 turns. So you can constantly do it. Basically, you can constantly cycle through that. And then when you master it, it refunds the unchecked power cost at the end of the round if it's resisted. So a nice little quality of life thing. Honestly, a pretty nice ability that has some uses. So I mentioned that Weird does something when mastered and 2 unchecked power tokens on every path. On this one, it gives 2 stealth to the ally. So keep that in mind. So that obviously sets up for some nice value with like Runaway that we talked about, who gets stealth value. Grave Robber gets good stealth value. Keep in mind, if you are going to play Wanderer Occultist and you want to be handing out those stealths, you should probably have another healer on your team, because do you really want to stealth your Man-at-Arms? You know, stealth your tank. So that's like a downside to it. Although it is more effective on squishier targets because you're allowed to stealth them more easily. You probably either want to run a second healer, meaning like the Vestal or whatever, or you probably want to run a healer, somebody like, you know, Flagellant that can heal themselves, or like Leper that can heal themselves, so you don't have to use Weird on them nearly as often, because yeah, this technically can be a downside. So one final change with the Occultist is a slight sacrificial stab change. So basically the gain on killing blow aspect goes to both mastered and unmastered. So you can get 2 unchecked power token with 1 hit on sack stab if you want to do that on Wanderer. You just need to hit into a combo and kill. The gain on killing blow, he gets extra corpse damage also. So plus 100% corpse damage is pretty much enough to, other than like some of the tanky size 2s, is pretty much, you know, other than, unless you get a really low roll, you can pretty much one-shot any corpse with that. So that's a nice little aspect where he interacts with corpses a little bit. I guess that's the idea behind Demon's Pull no longer clearing corpses, because you want to set up for him to kind of manually kill himself. Anyways. So, first path is, let's talk about Ritualist. So, Ritualist, another thing that I mentioned with Weird as a different bonus on every path. Having unchecked power tokens also is different on every path. So if you talk about Ritualist, so it says it increases debuff resist piercing while reducing debuff resist. So what that means is for every unchecked power token he has, he gets 10% debuff piercing and he loses 10% debuff resist. So keep that in mind. It's also the same Warlock with Warlock and Aspirant, in the sense that they also get different stats basically based on how many unchecked power tokens that he has, alongside the extra burn that is on all paths. So let's talk about Abyssal on Ritualist. Abyssal, when you have unchecked power tokens, whether it's mastered or unmastered, it will apply a blind when you have 2 unchecked power tokens instead of like the stun that it was before. And then if you, it has a 50% chance of adding a second blind token. And then when you master it, it's a 66% chance of adding a second blind token. Basically, and basically what they said, and I kind of agree with, adding 2 blinds every single time would be kind of busted, but these percentages make it so often enough to where you will get decent value out of it. Talking about Ritualist as a whole, pretty similar path. It's still fundamentally a pretty similar path. They gave it some extra tools, some different things that it can do, and he basically interacts. He actually interacts with unchecked power tokens now. Where with the old Ritualist, basically you would never. He didn't really interact with the unchecked power tokens unless you played him like really aggressively with Sack Stab or Binding Shadows or whatever, or with Sack Stab. Or if you had the trinket that is now changed that would give him would convert vulnerables into unchecked power tokens. So he actually gets them now, and he actually gets them in pretty different ways. So fundamentally, still a pretty similar path. Not a huge change, not like a huge overhaul. Just kind of some small changes to everything and like some small buffs. So we'll get into it. Talked about Abyssal. Let's talk about Weakening Curse. So Weakening Curse still does the same thing, except it adds this target on attack Occultist gains unchecked power token. So you see, unmastered is 1 turn, mastered it's 2 turns. So what this means is, first of all, the weak tokens and the target on attack Occultist gains thing are 2 different debuff resist checks. So technically they can resist one without resisting the other. So it's one thing you got to keep an eye on if you're trying to use this to get unchecked power tokens. So what that means is long story short, if you mark this on an enemy and the enemy hits multiple or tries to hit multiple targets, you will get multiple unchecked power tokens. So you think of like the Lord using Baneful Breath on your entire team. He gets max unchecked power tokens from that. Another way you can kind of cheese the enemies with this is you can use this on an enemy that gets riposte, and then this doesn't basically this buff doesn't expire to the end of their next turn that they get. So you can cast it on them, hit into the riposte a couple times, and you can kind of like cheese them that way. So a really effective way, really, if you understand the way that the enemies attack, you know, you're talking about heralds, you're talking about evangelists, you're talking about, you know, shell shock for the pillager guy that hits the rank 3 and 4, anything like that, you really want to weaken them. Just obviously the value that you get from them doing less damage, but more importantly, the unchecked power tokens that you get. So it rewards players that, you know, understand, I guess, how the enemies tend to attack, and then you just try to get the best value out of that you can. Ritualist's form of basically that extra buff that I talk about is it removes all negative tokens. You have 2 unchecked power tokens, as you can imagine. Getting 2 unchecked power tokens pretty easily, both with Weakening Curse and with other ways of getting it. You can use Sack Stab if you would like to also, if you'd like to use that to get unchecked power tokens. In my opinion, you don't really need to, but you definitely could. So he gets to remove all negative tokens. Nice to have another removal of negative tokens in the game. So vulnerability hex, essentially the same. No longer immediately gets rid of blocks and then adds the vulns. So there's that slight nerf. But what it does is you get an unchecked power token, both mastered and unmastered, whether it actually hits or not. So you can, if you're blinded, this might be a good ability to fire up because you're going to get the unchecked power token no matter what. And then as you see, when you master it, it gets this target on death. Occultist gains 1 unchecked power token. Kind of similar to Weakening Curse, except it's when they die. Keep in mind, this does still have the 1 cooldown, but you can put multiple of those on a target. So if it's like a big size 2 enemy and it happens to live long enough, you can get 2 of those essentially that target on death onto them. You can get 2 unchecked power tokens from their death essentially. So you see Binding Shadows. Binding Shadows does stealth him when he hits a target still, and it ignores stealth also, so that can be nice, especially in like K2 of Kingdoms. And then when you master it, it gives 2 stealth tokens to him, and it has the minus debuff resist aspect when he is stealthed. So we have our first new ability here. I guess Wander Malediction was new, but the first new ability on Ritualist specifically. Essentially, look at this. This looks confusing. Essentially, consider the enemy a pinata. So what that means is when you attack them, if it's unmastered, keep in mind that this is 2 unchecked power tokens, both mastered and unmastered. Whoever attacks them for 3 rounds is going to get a strength, block, dodge, or crit. And then if you master it, it upgrades those tokens to their block plus dodge plus equivalent, alongside inverting all of the positive tokens and removing riposte. So just they essentially turn into a pinata. So it is a little bit kind of like the old Malediction. It is a little bit kind of like where you're only really using it on tanky enemies, and like bosses and like size 2s, right? But it still is. It's a good ability to bounce some stuff, to bounce some positive tokens basically back to your team. So how would you run Ritualist? It depends. If you want to run Sack Stab, then you have to put him in rank 3. Otherwise, you can put him in rank 4. Binding Shadows, since it doesn't give you an unchecked power token anymore, is not super necessary. What you can do, if you would like to, is you can run, I would say something like this. Or sorry, something like this. Where I know it's awkward because the only damage that he can do is to rank 3 and 4. But Abyssal Artillery is a good ability. And that's when, if you're uncomfortable with that, where basically if the 3 and 4 enemies are dead, he's not doing damage, then you can obviously run Burning Stars instead if you would like, or you can run Sacrificial Stab instead, or you can run Burning Stars instead of Malediction, or you can even run Anamnesis. A lot of options. Really, it's kind of like the old. It is pretty much like the old Ritualist in the sense as long as you're running a heal and the 2 curses, really all that matters. If you go and you're playing this and you don't feel like it gets enough unchecked power tokens with these 2 abilities here, You can run Sack Stab for that. That'll add kind of an extra little bit to it. I mean, you could run Chaotic Offering if you want, I guess. But really, it's a fairly straightforward path in the same way that it was before. As long as you're running these 3 abilities, it's totally up to you what else you want to run with it. Yeah, it's totally up to you. Not a super rigid path as long as you're running these 3. Pretty good. Overall, I really like Ritualist. I liked Ritualist before. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but it's very effective. It does what it needs to do. It sets up vulns, it sets up combos for the team, and then you can do the pinata effect here with Malediction if you would like, or whatever else you want to use for your unchecked power tokens. As long as you're running these 3, you're pretty good. But yeah, I like Ritualist. So next up, we have old Warlock. Surprisingly, Warlock honestly is pretty similar damage to what it was before. Kind of like how I said with Alchemist, where Alchemist is similar damage and similar effectiveness, but you have to work on it a little bit more, meaning with Alchemist you have to give the dots. Warlock is essentially the same path for all intents and purposes, and I'll get into the differences. You're still spamming Burning Stars, and Burning Stars is probably your main ability. So I'm not a huge fan of this Warlock, and it's because you don't have to agree with me, but I want you to at least hopefully understand my position on this. I really like paths that give you a lot of tools, and none of the tools are overall better always than any other option. I like when you have 7, 8 abilities that you can run any time on a hero. And you can run any of them and master of them roughly in any order. Warlock is essentially old Warlock, where you're running the same skills every time. It's very effective, don't get me wrong. I'm not hating on anybody that loves Warlock, don't get me wrong. But I think this is one of those paths is why would you ever experiment with some other path when you can just play Warlock that's relatively straightforward and relatively simple and does what it needs to do. So again, that's my point of view. You don't have to agree with me, but I hope you at least kind of understand what I'm coming from. But Warlock, extremely effective, similar damage to what it was before. Really not too much setup. This is probably the most similar to the old path that there is. So, first of all, the unchecked power tokens. So for every unchecked power token he has, he deals +1 damage. Obviously, that doesn't make something that does 0 damage do damage, but Abyssal gets +1 damage. Sack Stab gets +1 damage, etc. And for every unchecked power token he gets, he takes 10% more damage. So you can have up to +30% damage taken. This used to be max health, kind of like how it was before, but they changed it to damage taken. So as you'll see, not a lot of changes. The unchecked power tokens, Chaotic Offering, and Weird, but I'll get into it. The Weird now actually gets the safest heal. So again, Ritualist was the safest heal before because it had the highest top end, but now Warlock gets the safest heal. It gives 2 regen on unchecked power, or mastered and with 2 unchecked power tokens. Basically what that means is that he'll never 0 bleed kill you. Again, in my opinion, not a huge fan of Warlock being the safest heal. Their idea kind of with these weirds being different is they kind of wanted to spread out. Each one has their own, and none is clearly better than the other. I mean, this one's kind of better than the others. At least it's safer. I kind of liked Ritualist personally. I kind of liked Ritualist being the safest heal path. I wish that Ritualist still got the higher top end. I'm sure the argument is that you get unchecked power tokens more often, which means you crit more often, which means I'm sure the average is higher, whatever, blah blah blah. I would like Ritualist to have this personally. That's just an opinion. But either way, Warlock having the best heal, pretty cool. So it gets a completely new malediction. So what this malediction is, long story short, is you mark an enemy, and this has 2 unchecked power tokens either way, whether you mastered or unmastered. It marks an enemy. When you hit the enemy, it's a 1 in 3 chance for your hero to heal 4, and it's a 1 in 3 chance of the enemy to heal 4. And mastered, it doubles the chance that you get healed, but it keeps the chance as 33% that they get healed. So RNG be with you. Like I said, I think Warlock is still Burning Stars the path. But if you do want to run this, it can be nice to get you out of a situation. Personally, I don't know if it's good enough to be worth running. I really like the ability. I really do. Like in general, like philosophically, I really like the ability. I don't know where you fit it. I don't know what you do with it, essentially. But I like it, though. I want it to be good. And this used to be percentage based, by the way, instead of heal 4. It used to be percentage based. It was like 10%, right? So I think that there was like a chance you could heal the Dreaming General for 20. It didn't work like that. Flat's probably a little bit better. It has a different anamnesis also. So anamnesis is a positive token remover. So what it does is it's 3 unchecked power token unmastered and it's 2 unchecked power token mastered. It does 1 damage base and then it does 3 damage per positive token that the enemy has. You'll see this bonus damage from unchecked power token is doubled. You also see it on Burning Stars. What that means is if you have 3 unchecked power tokens and it gives you plus 3 damage, this actually doubles it, so it'd be plus 6 damage. You can do a lot of damage with this. It removes all the positive tokens also. It's a bit of a tough ability to run because you need not only... Basically, the hero or the enemy you want to use it on, you're not going to use it quick enough probably to pop any tokens that they start with. It probably needs to be an enemy that gets tokens consistently. So you're talking like the Librarian, something like that. You know, the Knight, something like that, because he gets riposte. The Flare that gets riposte, something like that. But it can do a lot of damage in the right scenario. You see why you would equip it. It can do a lot of damage, essentially. Then we have Burning Stars. Burning Stars, essentially the same, a little bit nerfed. 2 damage on the low end and the top end, but it does do extra damage with, it does bonus damage from the unchecked power token. So still does a lot of damage though. I know this seems like a big nerf. Not really. Also, it does ignore blocking anyway. It still does a lot of damage. Chaotic Offering. Probably the most different thing of the path other than the completely new abilities. So there are 2 aspects of this, okay? There are the passive. So if you just put Chaotic Offering on your bar and never press it, you will get this 30% chance. Basically, it's the old Warlock passive, essentially. So it's a 30% chance of getting an unchecked power token on round start, or if you master it, it's a 60%. That's if you never press the button. So it has 2 effects. It has a passive and an active. So that's the passive. The active, what it is it does not end your turn when you press it, and it gives you 1 unchecked power token. And basically, it's for situations where you really need to blow up an enemy with Burning Stars, and you are 1 unchecked power token short, and you want to get it immediately. So it gives you that random side effect, and it does not end your turn. So it gives you essentially a second turn, essentially. If that random side effect that you get is a stun or a daze, it does not pop immediately. It works on your next turn, if that makes sense. But obviously, if it's like a weak token, for example, you will use that immediately. So technically, is a downside to that. And then it disables your round start effect, so it disables the passive. So again, you have the passive, where it's just giving you unchecked power tokens, and then if you press it, it gives you a 1 unchecked power token. The downside being, if it's a weak token, you have to rely on it immediately, or you have to use it immediately. And it also disables your round start effect for 3 turns. Keep in mind, and I don't know why it's like this, keep in mind this extra turn that you get. So when it says does not end turn, really what it means is it gives you an extra turn. So you can press Chaotic Offering and press Burning Stars at the same time. For whatever reason, that 3-turn cooldown counts the extra action that you get. So even though that says it's a 3-turn cooldown, it's actually a 2-turn cooldown. Or a cooldown meaning for the passive. That's kind of another aspect I don't like is about Warlock. And if you're coming here just to hear about the path, you can skip this. But my opinion on Warlock is it's just stupid good. Like, it's extremely effective, don't get me wrong. But again, coming from somebody that I think the strength of this game is like experimenting and everything. And Warlock is just so clearly like it was before. I was kind of excited for Warlock to be changed because I assumed it would be more interesting of a path. But it's just kind of not. And that being said, they definitely tried it and people didn't like it. Meaning like the feedback that I saw in the Discord. They weren't a big fan of it. So if this is what the people want, if the people still want Warlock to be kind of a Unga Boonga, me do big damage and that's it path, then I guess that's what people want. And I guess I'm in the minority and that's okay. Like I said, you don't have to agree with me, but I hope you understand like my mindset or my opinion, why I have the opinion that I have. But either way, it's still a really, really effective path. you know, a path that you it's and I can understand. I talked about with Alchemist how there can be comfort paths. Everybody's got comfort path they like to plug in. They know exactly what it's going to do, and it's going to be stable, and it's going to be consistent. That's what Warlock was. That's what Warlock still is, and it doesn't take the reduced health anymore. So if you are going to play Warlock, again, kind of how it was with how I said with Ritualist, is basically you're going to want him in rank 3 if you want Sacrificial Stab. You're going to want him in rank 4 if you want Binding Shadows. So basically, you definitely want Abyssal for the damage. Basically, you're going to go this. And the 3 buttons, the buttons basically what you're going to do is, if you're playing it at its best, what you're going to do is you're going to wait. Especially when you master Chaotic Offering, that's 60%. There, you can use Burning Stars on turn 1. Because what you can do is you can, on round start, you get the Unchecked Power Token. You press Chaotic Offering, and you immediately Burning Stars, and you one-shot, if not damn near one-shot, an enemy. And it immediately becomes 4 against 3. I don't think that's a particularly, again, my own opinion, I don't think that's a particularly engaging way to play. Although it is extremely effective. I just play the game differently than some other people. Please don't flame me if you disagree with me. I totally get it. I'm not flaming anybody that disagrees with me, but yeah, it's just not for me. But anyways, Abyssal does a lot of damage. You know, you get +3 damage from the, if you have 3 unchecked power tokens, that puts you at 6 to 10 on Mastery with a 10% crit chance. So pumping out a lot of damage. Sack Stab can also benefit from that. So it puts you at 8 to 11. Pumps out a lot of damage. Really just, with all these paths, you kind of just have to decide how do you want to get unchecked power tokens. Sack Stab's a good way to do it, or you can RNG it with Binding Shadows. You can do that also. Basically, those are the best ways to go about it, alongside kind of Chaotic Offering. This is another path that you're probably, with the exception of switching between Sack Stab and Binding Shadows, you're probably running these skills every time. Maybe you take Weird off if you want to be more aggressive and do like Demon's Pull. But these are, it's a pretty rigid as far as the way you're going about the skills. You're probably running this every time. Damn near. You could switch off, you know, again, if you want to go Malediction, you want to go Anamnesis, maybe you switch off depending on the fight. But this is I think, by far probably the most effective way to play him. So, last but not least, we have Aspirant here. So Aspirant was kind of I guess, basically a melee path. I liked Aspirant how it was before, but it, you know, it was gold. It's a good thing that's getting updated. So it's kind of a frontliner, kind of a slightly tankier path. It can move both forwards and backwards now, so that's cool. Binding Shadows moves forward, Sack Stab moves backwards. So that allows you to some more synergies, exactly with basically kind of like how you want to play it. So first thing, the unchecked power tokens. So what it is, it's you get a 70% chance of getting an unchecked power token when you move, whether it be through the enemies, you or an ally moving him. But they talk about diminishing returns. Basically, it's diminishing returns based on how many unchecked power tokens. So it goes from every unchecked power token you get, the percentage goes down 20%. So 0 tokens is 70%, 1 token is 50%, 2 tokens is 30%. So one thing I mentioned about Wanderer is sometimes you can get caught in an awkward scenario where you have 2 unchecked power tokens and you can't get the third, or you're like stuck on 2 because you expect to be able to use it, but then you don't have like mastered Burning Stars or whatever. Definitely with this, because of the diminishing returns, it's a 30% chance if you have 2 unchecked power tokens to get that third. So that can be a little awkward. So it's something you can rely on the moving a little bit, but you have to be moving a lot, or you have to play into it a little more, which you do have the opportunity to, which I'll get into. Aspirant I really like a lot. It's a really nice path, a really nice use. So let's get into Sack Stab. So Sack Stab, he does not get the block start, or the block plus on start like he did before, or the extra melee damage. This is moved around a little bit. So the changes are essentially that he moves back on Sack Stab, and on combo, instead of getting unchecked power token, he gets a block, but he still gets a unchecked power token with Killing Blow. So basically, the goal is to move around, get some unchecked power tokens that way, and then if you are 1 short, hopefully you let him get the Killing Blow, and he's able to get an unchecked power token like that. It still gets the Execution 1 on Mastery alongside the corpse damage. So, just a nice ability, basically a little bit different than Wanderer, works better with the path, but essentially the same. So the mastered unchecked power token buff, 2 unchecked power token buff on this is that it gets rid of dots. So that means with this patch, we have both Surgeon and Aspirant that are frontline healers that get rid of dots. So that's nice. That allows some more flexibility with the comps that we make, some new choices. So unchecked power tokens are relatively easy to get. I would argue, at least in my experience, Aspirant is a good enough solo dot healer. Obviously, you know, healer. I don't know if you'd want to make him a solo healer also, just based on the fact that he's the Occultist and he can zero bleed you at any time. But 2 unchecked power tokens happens often enough where you can get rid of dots. Obviously, there's going to be some scenarios where you have like AoE in the Fetter or the Sprawl, where they will be planting so much dot on your entire team that you can't quite put out all the fire. But I would say in an average fight, you're probably good enough having him have a dot clear. That's just me personally, though. You're obviously welcome to have your own opinions on it. So, Binding Shadows moves forward 1. It does not have a chance of giving you an unchecked power token, but it does, you know, obviously with the moving, it does allow you to do that. Still gives you a little bit of stealth interaction. You're probably not stealthing too much on Aspirant, at least in my experience, you're not. But it does give you the option of, if you're using Aspirant to move him into rank 2, you can basically force, it's kind of like a pseudo taunt. You can kind of force the enemy attacks into that front rank, into who's probably your tank. So that can be kind of nice, although you're probably not using it a ton. He doesn't get any stealth interaction other than that. So again, Aspirant gets the old Malediction, with the exception being, or the difference being, Mastered now changes that from 2 dot to 3 dot, and it doesn't lower their dot resistance like it did before. Keep in mind, Malediction is 2 unchecked power tokens, both mastered and unmastered. That's something that you can do while you're waiting for your mastery points in order to get the abilities that you want. Burning Stars actually burns now. So they nerf the damage a little bit, but it does have a fat burn next to it. You know, the 5 burn unmastered, keep in mind it is 3 unchecked power tokens unmastered, 2 unchecked power tokens mastered. And it goes from a 5 burn to a 6 burn mastered, and it copies his burn to the target. So that's nice if you don't have like a heat shield. If he is burning, pretty easily you can give him a 6, or pretty easy you can give him like a 7 or 8 burn. So really effective ability, especially with how often you can get these unchecked power tokens, both with sack stab getting it and just by moving in general. So definitely, it's still a spammable ability. It may not have the damage, obviously, that Wanderer does there. See that top end especially. 11 mastered versus 18 on Wanderer when it's mastered. So, you know, you see that. It seems like a lot, but it does still pump out a lot of damage. So if you are going to play Aspirant, I would say pretty much every time, I would go this. I think you still should use Anamnesis. I think you should dance him in between the 2 and 3 ranks. You can dance him. It's probably makes more sense to have him with somebody else, just because it does maximize the amount that you are able to get those unchecked power tokens. But you can have him move by himself if you want. You know, just Binding Shadows, Sack Stab, etc., etc. You can do this. Keep in mind that all of the abilities, obviously, but Binding Shadows, because moving forward would do nothing, can be used in Rank 1. So you can actually move him between 1 and 2, or you can move him between 2 and 3. It doesn't matter. You want to keep him out of Rank 4 as much as you can, because you lose Burning Stars and Anamnesis. But keep in mind, if he is there, like, you know, if he gets shuffled, and he gets there, obviously you can Binding Shadows to get him out of it. So being in Rank 4 isn't a big deal, but you do want to shuffle in between either 1, 2, or 2 and 3. The buff to Anamnesis definitely is an ability that you want to run, because it shuffles. Again, it used to be an ability that if you didn't use it by round 2, it's kind of wasted. But I would say this is a good ability to have, and especially with getting unchecked power tokens more than old Aspirant did, or like old Occultist in general. Anamnesis becomes a good use. So it becomes a good utility ability, being able to bleed the entire team. Adds a lot of synergies with other heroes. You know, you talk like Fiend, Abomination if you have the DLC. It's a very good ability, and then Burning Stars is still what Burning Stars is. A lot of damage. Maybe not the straight up damage in the same way that it is like on Warlock, but it does burn. I like Aspirant a lot. I think it's really cool. So final, getting to the trinkets of this. Sorry, I didn't get to screenshot the old trinkets, but we'll look at the Seeing Sphere. Seeing Sphere used to be converts. It used to be the old Ritualist trinket, essentially. It converts Volans to unchecked power tokens. So it's +1 damage per negative token on the target. Rain skills apply on hit. add 1 negative token, so that puts you at a Abyssal Demon's Pole, Burning Stars, and then gain when moved by enemy, add 1 negative token. Scalded Skull used to be extra healing on burning targets. What it does now is when you hit a target that is comboed, they get 1 burn, and then adjacent allies on turn start add 1 positive token when it's self-burning, which is going to be almost always, by the way. And then the downside is a chance of burning an enemy. Isn't a huge deal. Shambler's Eye, essentially the same, a little bit of change, plus 5% crit per stress, minus 5% healing given from skills per stress, and then when stress damaged, it combos a random enemy. So, Seeing Sphere, pretty good. You know, you can plant negative tokens, and if you get this, gives Ritualist some damage if you want to do that, or it gives obviously other paths damage also. Scalded Skull, honestly, this adjacent allies on turn start. This you might look at this and be like, why would I pay 65 baubles for this? This honestly might be worth it, because again, he's burning all the time, and unless like you're playing, you know, rank 4 Warlock, if you have him in the middle ranks at all, if you have him in rank 3, rank 2, really good value, because at the positive tokens, it's a guarantee, so it's you know, handing out positive tokens like that, really good. And then Shambler's Eye, still as risky as it was before. The adding to combo on stress damage is pretty good, because stress damage, you know, happens pretty often on these fights. Pretty good trinket if you want to run it. Yeah, if you want to run it. So those are all the path changes. If you have any questions, if you have any opinions that are different than mine, please let me know. To summarize them all, I honestly like all of them. Surgeon, being a frontline dot healer, I've always kind of said that it felt like we needed one more frontline dot healer or frontline healer, just to allow the sharp shot, Deadeye, Sergeant, Virtuoso, Intermezzo, and whatever backline paths are in the future, kind of to shine a little bit. So I really like Surgeon for that purpose. And then obviously Aspirant, you could say the same thing for. Alchemist, really strong, almost as strong as the old Alchemist. A lot of fun, because you get bonuses out of having a more rounded team as far as dots go, or just setting up herself. Position, I really like. Just a chaotic path. It may not have the flash that like Warlock does, but or Alchemist, but I think it's a good path. It's a good path to plug in and play a little different than Wanderer if you want to. Arsonist, Chaos Incarnate. It's a fun path to just pull out every once in a while and see what you at least trying it at least once. You might love it. It might not be for you. You might love it. You might hate it, but it's worth at least trying. Survivor, one of my favorite. Survivor's a bit like Physician, where it may not be the flashiest change, but a really good path. One that you can really fit in anywhere, and it plays a little bit different. It doesn't play a ton differently. It has some of the higher. It has top end utility as far as applying combo and blinds. Alongside the damage and then the token stealing aspect of it. I really like Survivor. I think Survivor is one of those paths that's going to go a little when people talk about their favorite paths from this, I don't think a lot of people are going to say Survivor again, because it doesn't have the flash to it. So nice. Orphan, I really like also. I liked the rank flexible aspect of old Orphan, because it was kind of like 2 paths in one, and now it's still basically 2 paths in one, which is cool. I think I'm super impressed that they philosophically kind of kept Orphan the same that it is. You can play Orphan twice and play them completely differently and have them feel like different paths. That is super cool and really hard to implement in a way that doesn't make one way stronger than the other. Like, I think they are, depending on the comps. I think they're pretty equal. Super cool. I love the way that they went through Orphan. Aspirant, I really like also. Aspirant, I think I liked the old Aspirant, but it did have some really frustrating points to it. And now it doesn't really have that nearly as much. It works better for dance teams, for shuffle teams, which I know people are going to love. Anamnesis, the Anamnesis buff is one that you really feel on Aspirant. You still have the Malediction if you want the old Malediction. Another frontline dot healer, super cool. And I love that one. Ritualist, again, Ritualist, kind of like Aspirant, where I don't think it really needed too much. It just needed some updates. It needed a a new coat of paint, if you will. And I like it a lot. Again, another one of those not super flashy, but you plug it in, especially with the buff to weak tokens, to be able to hand out 2 weak tokens every other turn and still get debuff piercing. Really, really good. A really, really nice path. One of those unsung hero sort of paths. I'm glad that they kept these in the game. I think there's place for simplicity. You know, you're talking about Warlock, Ritualist, Survivor, Physician. I think there's a place for simplicity in paths. Sharpshot, Deadeye, another one that just are consistent and they do what they do and you know what they're going to do. But they don't, you know, they're not going to they're maybe not going to be the most flashy in the world, but I think it's super cool. So I really like Ritualist. Warlock, again, you know, I let my opinion know of Warlock. I think it's just a little, I think it's just really strong for no effort, and I specifically, particularly, personally, not a huge fan of that, but that's okay. I'm not, you know, if anybody comes in and tells me that Warlock's the favorite path, I'm not gonna be like, you're a fucking idiot. It's just not for me. I like experimenting and I like doing different things, and that basically has one skill set and that's it. But overall, love the Steadfast Steward update. Again, check out the other stuff in the patch notes, the description. Look over those. Again, if you have any questions, please ask me either here, comments, whatever, or stop by my Twitch stream where I stream every day. Again, twitch.tv/MarinerHawk. Thank you for any amount of video that you watched. If you watched the whole thing, if you watched part of it, I appreciate it. Hope you have a nice rest of your day. I will also, you know, I will probably do a similar thing with this also when Hellion and Leper come out and any other big changes that the game comes out with. So please stay tuned for whatever videos that I decide to add. I got some good ideas and decided to come up with them. So thank you again. Have a nice rest of your day. Thank you for watching.